Chapter 820. In the distance, Lu Zi saw the red cannonball falling from the sky. She immediately exclaimed, "Qin Xuan, watch out." Before Lu Zi could finish her sentence, she was sent flying backward by an extremely terrifying explosion. The hillside where Qin Xuan was standing earlier had been engulfed in flames. The space within a radius of dozens of kilometers had completely turned into a sea of fire. The scorching heat was enough to melt any metal in an instant. Jingyu couldn't help but laugh when he saw this scene in the distance. He proudly said, "This is a divine cannon that I've carefully studied for many years." The temperature generated by the explosion was at least 4,000 degrees. Even if you're an expert in the divine transformation realm, there's no way you can come out unscathed. Just as Jingyu was laughing proudly, a red figure suddenly rushed out of the sea of fire and quickly attacked the Star Dragon. It crashed into the defensive rune array of the Star Dragon with a loud bang. Boom! The red figure was repelled by the defensive rune array and slammed into the mountain. The red figure looked like it was in pain as its aura withered. Jingyu looked at the figure embedded in the mountain, and a look of dread flashed across his face. He said in a deep voice, "I really didn't expect your life to be so tenacious. You actually didn't die after being hit by the divine cannon." Hearing Jingyu's words, Qin Xuan, whose body was boiling hot, glared at Jingyu and said, "You bastard! How can I die if you're not dead yet?" If it weren't for the fact that he was so worried about Baiyu's safety that he neglected his guard against the Star Dragon, Jingyu's sneak attack wouldn't have succeeded. Even if you're not dead yet, I don't think it's any different from being dead. Why don't you let me send you on your way?" Jingyu sneered. Although Qin Xuan was not dead yet, his condition was extremely bad. The firepower of the Star Dragon was enough to slowly kill Qin Xuan. Although Qin Xuan was extremely angry when he heard Jingyu's words, there was nothing he could do. The high temperature generated at the moment of the explosion had filled all the meridians in his body with the power of flames. He could only use 30% of the spiritual power in his body. It was impossible for him to resist the bombardment of the Star Dragon's cannons for a short time. Even if the Star Dragon's cannons couldn't kill him immediately, they could torture him to death bit by bit. "You despicable man! You're shameless!" Qin Xuan angrily cursed Jingyu, but Jingyu acted as if he didn't hear him. He looked extremely calm as he smiled and waved at Qin Xuan and said, "Goodbye, my friend." As Jing uses cannons, the Star Dragon's cannons were to bombard him from all directions until they ran out of bullets. At this moment, Lu Zi's figure suddenly appeared in front of the Star Dragon. "Bastard, don't even think about hurting Qin Xuan." Hearing LVZ's angry "Oh hushung," Jingyu couldn't help but raise his eyes to look at LVZ. He sneered and said, "Don't be anxious. Once we've dealt with Qin Xuan, I'll send you down to meet him." I said, "Don't even think about hurting Qin Xuan." Lu Zi shouted and suddenly threw a soul-luring bottle at the Star Dragon. The soul-luring bottle shattered in the air, and a pale soul flew out of it straight toward the Star Dragon. Qin Xuan, who was embedded in the mountain, looked at the soul flying toward Star Dragon, and shock flashed across his eyes. He cried out involuntarily, "Baiyu!" Hearing Qin Xuan's cry, Baiyu, who had lost her physical body and only her soul survived, turned around and smiled at Qin Xuan. She said silently, "Qin Xuan, thank you. Stop pretending to be mysterious." Jingyu looked at Baiyu and immediately ordered the Star Dragon to launch a soul power attack at her to destroy her soul. However, just as the soul power cannon aimed at Baiyu and was about to launch an attack, the Star Dragon suddenly trembled violently. Jingyu looked at the deck that kept shaking under his feet in shock. Before he could figure out why this happened, an extremely powerful energy wave suddenly erupted from the inside of the Star Dragon. The deck of the Star Dragon collapsed and turned into debris. Buzz! A faint green light suddenly bloomed from the exploding Star Dragon. Then, a towering tree emerged from the sea of fire caused by the explosion, shocking everyone. Baiyu looked at the towering tree that grew out of the raging fire with a complicated expression. She said softly, "The Star Dragon is just a steel shell on the hope. When this steel shell shatters, the star dragon will no longer exist in this world. There will only be a new hope. Boom! The towering tree completely disintegrated the star dragon into countless parts. Faint green light emitted from the crown of the towering tree and surged in all directions. Bayu's soul seemed to be summoned and slowly floated toward the towering tree. Bit by bit, she disappeared into the towering tree. After Bayu's soul fused into the towering rock and disappeared, the towering tree suddenly twisted and turned into a huge, verdant wooden flying ship in the air, the Hope. Looking at the Hope flying in the air, Qin was deeply shocked. He always thought the star dragon was just a modification of the Hope's original foundation. He never thought the Hope and the star dragon were two completely different things. Qin wasn't the only one who was shocked. Jingyu, who had been in control of Star Dragon for thousands of years, was also stunned. He thought that he had studied Star Dragon thoroughly, but he didn't expect that what he had studied was only the surface. This is the Hope, a real spaceship of the universe. Gowen's eyes were filled with shock as he stared at the Hope. He had read many of his ancestors' records, and they only described the Hope as shocking, powerful, and unparalleled intelligence. There was no record of what the Hope looked like. Now that he saw the Hope, he finally understood how those ancestors felt. Words couldn't describe the impact and shock that the Hope had brought to the people. The Star Dragon was just a puppet. The Hope hidden inside was the real spaceship that could cross the universe. No wonder I couldn't find out what was so special about the Star Dragon after so many years. It's not the Star Dragon that can take me to the outside world. Jingyu's face was filled with pain and regret. If he had discovered this earlier, perhaps he would have gone to the outside world and become a soul-forming cultivator or even stronger. However, Jingyu could only think about it, because it was useless even if he discovered the Hope's secret. The only ones who could awaken the Hope were the Blood Elves, and Bayu was the only one in the world who had this qualification. Chapter 8:21. Buzz. The reborn Hope slowly released a soft green light that fell on Qinchuan's body. Qinchuan's injuries healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The power of fire accumulated in Qinchuan's meridians was also dispelled in an instant. Not only that, but a large cluster of flowers and plants grew wildly around Qinchuan, exuding an extremely rich aura of life. Then, Qinchuan's body slowly flew toward the Hope under the guidance of the green light. When Jingyu saw this scene on the ground, he immediately wanted to turn around and escape. At this moment, an extremely long vine suddenly grew out of the Hope and wrapped around Jingyu. Seeing this, Jingyu tried to cut off the vine, but the vine was extremely tough. No matter how hard Jingyu tried, he could not even leave a mark on it. Swoosh! Swoosh! The vine tightly wrapped around Jingyu's body. No matter how Jingyu struggled, he could not break free. This made Jingyu feel a sense of despair. The firepower of the Star Dragon was nothing compared to the miraculous power of the Hope. He had carefully kept it like a treasure for thousands of years. Qinchuan slowly landed on the deck. Looking at the forest-like deck of the Hope in front of him, his eyes were full of curiosity. At this moment, a figure slowly appeared before him. It was Bayu who had entered the Hope earlier. However, compared to her soul state at that time, Bayu was no different from a normal person now. Moreover, her hair had turned into a verdant green. She looked as pure and beautiful as a forest elf. Bayu, you've been resurrected? Qinchuan looked at Bayu standing in front of him with a face full of surprise. Bayu shook her head and explained to Qinchuan, I haven't been resurrected. What you see now is the state of the Hope soul. In essence, I'm still a soul. It's just that I look more real. Hearing Bayu's words, Qinchuan was a little surprised. Soul? Are you saying that the Hope is a Taoist weapon? Bayu nodded and said to Qinchuan, thousands of years ago, the Hope was built by the combined efforts of the entire race. It is indeed a Taoist weapon and a supreme grade one, a top-grade Tao artifact. Upon hearing Bayu's explanation, Qinchuan couldn't help but gasp. Back then, Zeus Technologies' glove had only displayed power equivalent to a mid-grade Tao artifact, and it had already been broken by the various forces. Now, the Hope was actually a top-grade Tao artifact. If this news were to spread, it would definitely cause a sensation in the entire world. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that whoever owned the Hope would conquer the world. Even a full-circle nascent soul stage cultivator might not be able to last more than a few rounds against the Hope. Jingyu is a good example. Now that you've become the weapon's soul, will there be any bad consequences? Qingchuan looked at Baiyu worriedly. To be honest, if he had to choose, he would prefer Baiyu to be a normal person and not a weapon soul. If there's a bad consequence, it's probably that I'll never be able to leave the Hope again. Baiyu smiled faintly. For others, this might be a very difficult thing to accept, but for me, the last of the elven race's bloodline, being able to stay on the Hope is a very happy thing. Hearing Baiyu's words, Qingchuan's expression couldn't help but become somewhat complicated. He didn't know whether Baiyu was truly happy or just trying to find joy in the midst of suffering. Baiyu saw the change in Qingchuan's expression and smiled at Qingchuan. Actually, as the weapon soul of the Hope, I'll be more at ease because this way, I won't have to worry about so many things and can simply stay by your side. As she spoke, Baiyu took a step forward and grabbed Qingchuan's hand. She gently bit Qingchuan's index finger and sucked Qingchuan's blood into her mouth. Seeing Baiyu's actions, Qingchuan was slightly stunned. It wasn't until some faint telepathy between him and Baiyu that he realized Baiyu's actions just now were to recognize him as her master. Baiyu, I'm willing to do this. You don't have to feel any psychological burden. Moreover, the Hope is a top-grade Tao tool and needs to be nourished by spirit force. You're the most suitable master, aren't you? Baiyu interrupted Qingchuan. She didn't want to hear Qingchuan say something she didn't like to hear. She looked at Qingchuan with an extremely serious gaze and said to Qingchuan, if you want someone else to become my master, then cut off the telepathy between you and the Hope. Hearing Baiyu's words, Qingchuan's belly full of words finally turned into a deep sigh. When Jingyu saw Qingchuan's reaction, he couldn't help but reveal a furious expression. Everyone else dreamed of obtaining a top-grade Tao artifact like the Hope, yet Qingchuan was still unwilling even though the opportunity was already in his hands. How infuriating! Jingyu, who was still tied up by the vines, couldn't help but reveal a furious expression. Qingchuan, if you want to kill me or cut me into pieces, just do it. When Qingchuan heard this, he turned to Jingyu and said, don't worry, I won't let you live. The others can live, but you can't. Hearing Qingchuan's words, Jingyu's expression suddenly froze. He didn't expect that he wouldn't be able to receive the same treatment as Yi Ting from Qingchuan. Qingchuan actually wanted to kill him. You won't kill Yi Ting, so why do you want to kill me? Jingyu angrily roared. He wasn't willing to accept this. He needed a reasonable explanation. Qingchuan looked deeply at Jingyu and said in a deep voice, everyone has the right to kill evil cultivators. People like you who harm others for their own benefit deserve to be killed. If Jingyu hadn't imparted evil techniques to Shangwan Yuanhao wouldn't have killed his parents. In the end, it was Jingyu who ruined his family. Hearing Qingchuan's words, Jingyu angrily roared, Qingchuan, you'll die a horrible death. Even if I die, I won't. Before Jingyu could finish his words, the vines wrapped around his body instantly grew countless sharp thorns and pierced his body. They directly erased his soul, causing him to completely disappear from this world. Whoosh! Jingyu's corpse was thrown out of the Hope by the vines. It fell to the ground and turned into a cloud of dust before it even touched the ground. After doing all this, Baiyu looked at Qingchuan and asked, you won't blame me for making the decision for you, right? Qingchuan used Baiyu as an excuse and said, Jingyu deserved to die. No matter who killed him, I'll only feel satisfied. Now that Shangwan Yuanhao was dead, the main culprit, Jingyu, was also dead. Qingchuan could be considered to have gotten his revenge and could finally put down one of his worries. After dealing with the matters in the Star Dragon Federation, he would embark on a journey to the outside world in search of a wider world. Chapter 822. After Jingyu's death, the battle came to an end. Although Qin Chuan won the final victory, he wasn't in a good mood because Sky City was gone. Perhaps less than a tenth of the tens of millions of people in Sky City would survive. This was a very painful thing for everyone. However, the statistics of these casualties were Gowen's job. Qin Chuan had other things to do. As soon as Qin Chuan left the elf, he rushed to Lu Zi's side. He looked at Lu Zi and asked nervously, "Where's senior sister?" Hearing Qin Chuan asking about Zhou Lin's situation, Lu Zi looked troubled. She said to Qin Chuan, "I'll take you to see her. You have to be mentally prepared. Her situation isn't very good." Seeing the troubled look on Lu Zi's face, Qin Chuan had a bad premonition. When Lu Zi brought him to Zhou Lin's side and saw Zhou Lin on the verge of death, Qin Chuan's face turned completely gloomy. He didn't expect Zhou Lin's situation to be so bad. Senior sister, senior sister? Qin Chuan squatted by Zhou Lin's side and looked at the pale-faced and unconscious Zhou Lin. His face was full of heartache and regret. If he had known the truth earlier, he would not have waited until now to rush over. He would have rescued Zhou Lin and helped her escape the abyss of suffering. However, it was too late to think about this now. What had happened had already happened. He could not turn back time. Qin Chuan tried to transfer his spiritual power into Zhou Lin's body. However, all the meridians in Zhou Lin's body were broken. Even her dantian was destroyed. She couldn't accept the spiritual power he transferred. If he forcefully transferred his spiritual power into Zhou Lin's body, it would cause more damage to her body and accelerate her death. Baiyu, do you have a way to save her? Qin Chuan suddenly thought of Baiyu. Treat her like how you treated me. Baiyu's figure slowly appeared beside Qin Chuan. She glanced at Zhou Lin's condition and said to Qin Chuan with some regret, "I'm sorry, I can't save her. She can't take any impact right now, not even the softest life force." In short, Zhou Lin was beyond saving. Zhou Lin was only at the Golden Core realm. When she faced Shanghuan Yuanhao, whose strength was close to the nascent soul realm, even a casual strike from him would have been extremely fatal to her. In addition, he had delayed the best time to treat her. Zhou Lin was already very lucky to have survived until now. Qin Chuan. At this moment, an extremely soft cry sounded in Qin Chuan's ears. Qin Chuan looked at Zhou Lin, who was slowly opening her eyes, tears welling up in his eyes. "Senior sister, I'm here." Qin Chuan sobbed as he hugged Zhou Lin. "I'm sorry, it's my fault. I came too late." "Qin Chuan, it's not your fault. Father and I were wrong. We chose the wrong person." Zhou Lin's condition seemed to be gradually improving, showing signs of terminal lucidity. "I let you down back then. I never had the chance to apologize to you. I'm really sorry." Hearing Zhou Lin's apology, Qin Chuan shook his head. "Senior sister, you didn't do anything wrong. It's that bastard Shanghuan Yuanhao and Jingyu who were wrong." Qin Chuan hated Shanghuan Yuanhao and Jingyu to the bone. He even regretted not killing them first. He should have tortured them to death. "Qin Chuan, I'm really happy to be able to see you again at the end of my life." Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan. "There are some words that I've been holding back in my heart. Now, I can finally say them without restraint. Actually, I realized that I liked you back at the training camp during the winter break, but you gave me the Foundation Establishment elixir back then. I owed you too much, so I couldn't tell you the words that were in my heart. I didn't expect that I still owe you even now. Senior sister, don't say anymore." Qin Chuan cried bitterly. "We'll still have a chance in the future. Qin Chuan, I don't want to be a ghost cultivator. Don't summon my soul after I die. Just let me leave this world in peace." Zhou Lin looked seriously at Qin Chuan. "I've already died without regrets. This is my last wish. Please, help me fulfill it." As her voice became softer and softer, Zhou Lin's life aura also became weaker and weaker until it completely disappeared. The senior sister who had given Qin Chuan a lot of help when he first embarked on the path of cultivation and accompanied Qin Chuan through the purest and most beautiful moments of his life had finally left this world. The curtain finally fell on the first white moonlight. "Senior sister." Qin Chuan hesitated again and again, but in the end, he complied with Zhou Lin's wishes. He didn't summon her soul and let her go with the wind and reincarnate. Looking at Zhou Lin's body that was gradually becoming cold in his arms, Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said to Bai Yu, "Take me to the Cloud Dragon mountain range. I want to bury Senior's sister there. I'll go with you." Lu Zi looked at Zhou Lin's body with a complicated gaze. "I also want to send her on her way." Bai Yu nodded lightly. With a thought, a green light fell from the hope and pulled them into it. With a flash of green light, the hope disappeared from the sky and appeared in the sky above the Cloud Dragon mountain range almost instantly. The place Qin Chuan chose for Zhou Lin was the place where they first entered the Cloud Dragon mountain range. He didn't specially build a grave for Zhou Lin. He simply dug a hole and wrapped Zhou Lin's body tightly with leaves. Just like that, he simply buried her. Ka. Qin Chuan cut a piece of bluestone into a long strip and carved the words "Eternal Senior, Zhou Lin's grave" with his finger. Then, he erected the tombstone in front of the grave. LVZ glanced at the surroundings, and with a wave of her hand, she set up an illusory array in the surroundings. She whispered to Qin Chuan, "There are many wild beasts in this Cloud Dragon mountain range. It's better to set up an illusory array so as to not disturb her rest." Hearing Lu Zi's words, Qin Chuan nodded lightly and said to Lu Zi, "You're more meticulous than I thought." Qin Chuan took 2 steps back and looked at the grave that he personally piled up in front of him. He said to Lu Zi, "Too many things have happened in these years. The people around us have left one after another." LVZ took a deep look at Qin Chuan and said in a low voice, "No one can be eternal. We will all die. I just hope that when my death comes, I'll be able to die without regrets like her." After standing quietly for a while, Qin Chuan said to the two, "Let's go. There are still many things to deal with." Although the curtains were drawn on the war, the matter of how to deal with the ancients was still undecided. Chapter 823. When Qin Chuan and the others returned to the ruins of the Sky City, Gao En had just finished calculating the death toll. Due to the appearance of Star Dragon, 12 million people died in the Sky City, and less than 1 million survived. This was even more heart-wrenching than Qin Chuan had expected. Qin Chuan, the 12 million people who died, were the people of the Star Dragon Federation. They were the foundation of the human race. Gaoen's face was full of pain. As the chairman of the Star Dragon Federation, he felt that he was a failure. Not only did he fail to lead the Star Dragon Federation to a better future, but he also caused the Star Dragon Federation to suffer heavy losses one after another. Qin Chuan sighed and said to Gao En, "It's my fault. If I had killed Jing Yu in the first place, none of this would have happened." Gao En shook his head and said to Qin Chuan, "Don't say that. You've done enough. It's our fault for being so incompetent and pushing all the blame onto you. If it weren't for you, the Star Dragon Federation might have ceased to exist long ago, and the human race would have sacrificed more people." Qin Chuan could blame himself, but Gao En would never blame Qin Chuan, because Qin Chuan had been contributing from the beginning and had never asked for anything in return. Qin Chuan did not want to continue talking about this sad topic, so he changed the subject and said, "Brother Gao, where are the Ancient Ones? I want to see them. They're being held down there. I'll take you there." Gao En glanced at Qin Chuan and asked, "What are you going to do with them?" Qin Chuan narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a rather complicated tone, "You'll know later." On the ground, in the deep pit where Yi Ting was, in addition to Yi Ting who was nailed to the ground, there were also 2 people who were tied up. They were Qian Wujin and Shimin Weiyang, who were previously trapped in Star Dragon. They were affected by the explosion of Star Dragon. When they regained their consciousness, their spiritual power had been sealed and they were tied up. Jing Yu is dead. The 3 of us are imprisoned here. Qin Fenghua managed to escape. Qian Wujin's face was filled with resentment. It must be Qin Chuan, that brat, colluded with Qin Fenghua. When Shimin Weiyang heard Qian Wujin's words, she sighed and said, "We have already become prisoners. Why should we think about those useless things?" In my opinion, that brat Qin Chuan is afraid of us." Qian Wujin was still indignant. "He just doesn't dare. I don't dare to do anything." At this moment, Qin Chuan's figure suddenly appeared in front of Qian Wujin. He looked at Qian Wujin expressionlessly, as though he was waiting for Qian Wujin to finish a sentence. When Qian Wujin saw the sudden appearance of Qin Chuan, he straightened his neck and gritted his teeth. You don't dare to fight us head-on, so you can only use these little tricks to divide us. Qin Chuan sneered and said to Qian Wujin, since you think I don't have the courage to fight you head-on, I will give you this opportunity now. I will let you go and fight you one-on-one. If you can escape from me, I swear I will never trouble you again in my life. But if you can't escape, I will send you to hell to meet Jingyu. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Qian Wujin couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Qin Chuan was looking down on him too much. However, if he really had a fight with Qin Chuan one-on-one, he had no confidence that he could escape from Qin Chuan. Moreover, Qin Chuan had just revealed a very important piece of information to him. Jingyu is dead. You killed Jingyu. Shimin Weiyang looked at Qin Chuan in shock. She couldn't believe that Qin Chuan had actually killed Jingyu. Jingyu was an evil cultivator and had a grudge with me. Isn't it normal for me to kill him? Qin Chuan pursed his lips. You should feel lucky that you're still alive, because there's no enmity between us. If you continue to go against me, I'll have no choice but to kill you. Qin Chuan didn't have a good impression of these ancients. If it wasn't for the fact that he still needed them in the future, he would definitely find a place to lock them up until they died. What do you want to do to us? Shimin Weiyang looked at Qin Chuan. You captured us, but didn't kill us. You must have a purpose. Qin Chuan nodded and said to Shimin Weiyang, I do have a purpose. As he spoke, Qin Chuan shot his gaze towards Yi Ting, who was still nailed to the ground, and he said to everyone, all three of you are humans and are experts at the perfection stage of the nascent soul realm. It would be a pity to kill all of you like this, so I feel that I should sign a contract with all of you. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Qian Wujin couldn't help but say, you want to enslave us? You want us to be your slaves? You think too much. Qin Chuan shook his head. Soon, I will leave the Star Dragon Federation and go to the depths of the universe. After I leave, the Star Dragon Federation will lose its protection. So I want you to become the guardians of the Star Dragon Federation and protect the Star Dragon Federation. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Qian Wujin couldn't help but frown. He said to Qin Chuan, you want to bind us to the Star Dragon Federation? Qin Chuan looked deeply at Qian Wujin and said in a deep voice, you can also choose to die. Between death and protecting the Star Dragon Federation, a sensible person should know how to choose. Seeing that everyone was silent, Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said, I know you want to seek a breakthrough and go to a wider world. So I can set a condition for you. As long as you meet this condition, you can leave the Star Dragon Federation and go to the outside world at any time. This time, Yi Ting was the first to speak. He asked Qin Chuan, what is the condition? Qin Chuan looked at Yi Ting and replied, cultivate an excellent successor. When the successor becomes a great circle nascent soul stage cultivator, you can leave the Star Dragon Federation and go anywhere you want. Yi Ting looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, the hope is taken away by you. Even if we fulfill our promise, we can't leave. No, you have a way. Qin Chuan replied, Zerg was defeated and we seized a lot of Zerg battleships. Zerg battleships have the ability to cross the universe. As long as you meet my condition, you can choose any Zerg battleship and leave the Star Dragon Federation. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Yi Ting and the other two no longer hesitated. They were about to agree to Qin Chuan's condition and sign the contract when Qin Fenghua suddenly appeared in front of Qin Chuan. Add me to your contract. I don't think you mind, right? Chapter 824. Qin Chuan wasn't surprised by Qin Fenghua's appearance because he believed that Qin Fenghua would take the initiative to find him and join the contract after this matter spread. Qin Fenghua had simply arrived earlier than he had expected. Of course I don't mind. Qin Chuan looked at Qin Fenghua with a subtle gaze. As long as you don't continue doing those disgusting things, it's fine. After signing the contract with Yi Ting and the other three, Qin Chuan let them go and said, you can move freely now. You know the restrictions in the contract, so I won't say more. As for the successor you want to choose, it must be a young man under the age of 30. Don't think about taking advantage of any loopholes. All right, that's all I have to say. Goodbye. Just as Qin Chuan was about to turn around and leave, Yi Ting suddenly called out to Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan, when are you going to leave the Star Dragon Federation and head to the outside world? This question was not only Yi Ting's concern, it was also the concern of the others. Among them, none of them had truly left the Star Dragon Federation. It could be said that they had no idea what the outside world was like. They all want to know what Qin Chuan's opinion and attitude toward the outside world was. Qin Chuan was silent for a moment before answering. I'm not sure about the exact time, but I'll definitely leave within a year. Yi Ting looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, when you leave, I hope I can send you off and personally see you embark on a new journey. Qin Chuan smiled and nodded. No problem, I'll inform you when the time comes. After Qin Chuan left, Yi Ting faintly sighed and asked everyone, do you think Qin Chuan will succeed? After so many years, I've never seen anyone come back. The center of the Kunlun field is almost the limit of people like us. Tens of millions of years had passed. Countless sages of the human race had embarked on the path to find a wider world. However, none of them had ever returned. Some people believed that those people had lived a good life in the outside world and didn't want to return. Some people believed that those people didn't manage to find the outside world and died in the universe. Many people believed that those people didn't manage to find the outside world and died in the universe. I don't know if he'll succeed, but even if I know I'll die, I still have to try. Qin Fenghua clenched her fists. She was already at the peak of the nascent soul realm 1,000 years ago. Now that 1,000 years had passed, she didn't make any progress. No matter how she cultivated, her realm was stuck at the peak of the nascent soul realm. Qin Fenghua had enough of this feeling. She wouldn't give up even if there was only a sliver of hope. If it weren't for us old fellows looking for that slim chance of a breakthrough, why would we sleep for thousands of years and only wake up occasionally? Qian Wujing grinned. It's just a pity that we old guys were defeated by a young man. The gap is too big. Now, Qin Chuan was not even 20 years old, but his strength had already surpassed them. After Qin Chuan went to the wider world, it would be a matter of minutes for him to surpass them. Qin Chuan is a person with great luck. Perhaps he will really be the first human to walk out of this banished land. Shimen Weiyang took a deep look at Qin Chuan's back. We've been wrong before. Fortunately, we made the right choice this time. After dealing with Yi Ting and the other three, Qin Chuan and Gao went to the Hope. Gao stood on the deck of the Hope and looked at the green, forest-like Hope. He said to Qin Chuan with emotion, "This is the Hope. The Star Dragon is so much worse than the Hope." Qin Chuan nodded slightly and said to Gao, "Indeed, the Hope is the real space battleship. The Star Dragon is just a slightly bigger battleship." Qin Chuan, you just said that you're going to leave for the outside world. When you plan to leave? Gao looked at Qin Chuan with a complicated gaze. The young man in front of him was walking faster and faster. He felt that it was difficult for him to even see Qin Chuan's back. After taking back the air center and driving Zerg out completely, I'll prepare to leave. Qin Chuan looked at Gao. I won't do anything to take back the air center. Let Yi Ting and the other three do it. During this time, I'll take the Hope and travel around the Star Dragon Federation to unlock all the immortal trap rune arrays. I'll need Brother Gao to provide me with some specific locations. Of course, Gao agreed readily. Go ahead and do what you want to do. Leave the rest of the trivial matters to me. Also, my people have checked. Among all the Zerg battleships, there should only be 10 that are completely preserved and have the ability to cross the universe. Gao pursed his lips and said to Qin Chuan, I want to keep one and learn some advanced Zerg technology. I want to build a space battleship that belongs to the Star Dragon Federation as soon as possible. Brother Gao, you can do as you see fit. You don't have to discuss it with me. You're the chairman of the Star Dragon Federation. I'm just a cultivator. I'm not interested in other things. Qin Chuan looked at Gao. After I leave, some of my friends will still be in the Star Dragon Federation. Brother Gao, you'll have to take good care of them. Don't worry, I'll definitely take good care of your friends. Gao promised solemnly. Qin Chuan's friends were his friends. He would naturally take good care of them. Now that we're done with these trivial things, let's get down to business. Qin Chuan looked at Gao curiously and asked, Brother Gao, do you have any records about the outside world? I have many things I want to know. Gao shook his head when he heard this, and then he said to Qin Chuan, if you want to know about the matters of the outside world, then you've come to the wrong person. You should go look for Yi Ting and the others. They've lived for almost 10,000 years, and they know far more things than us. Moreover, the name Place of Exile came from them. Qin Chuan looked at Gao deeply and nodded. Then I'll go look for them. After saying that, Qin Chuan prepared to leave. Seeing this, Gao asked hesitantly, Qin Chuan, don't you plan to leave behind a descendant before you leave? This time, no one knows what you'll encounter and what will happen when you travel across the universe. If you encounter misfortune, then your bloodline will be cut off. Gao was reminding Qin Chuan out of goodwill. He didn't have any other intentions. Qin Chuan looked back at Gao deeply and said, Brother Gao, thank you for your reminder. However, I don't have such plans. I believe I can survive until the end. Chapter 825. After several years, Qin Chuan finally met Yarao again. But strangely, there wasn't any excitement in his heart. His expression was too calm and too dull. Regarding this, Yarao didn't feel anything, but Yao Feng was aware of the astonishing changes in Qin Chuan's body. Compared to the first time they met, the current Qin Chuan was much more mature and also much more steady. Just think about it. If it was anyone else, they would have matured after experiencing so many things. On the contrary, Yarao still looked like a little girl who lived in a comfortable environment. When she stood together with Qin Chuan, they didn't have the feeling of a perfect match like before. Instead, they made people feel somewhat out of place. Thinking of this, Yao Feng's gaze towards Qin Chuan couldn't help but become somewhat complicated. There were some things that he should be mentally prepared for. Qin Chuan, I miss you so much. The longing in Yarao's heart made her completely unable to maintain her calm in front of Qin Chuan. Even if Yao Feng was standing beside her, she still couldn't help but throw herself into Qin Chuan's bosom and cried. After so many years, she really missed Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan gently hugged Yarao's soft body and breathed in the familiar fragrance of Yarao's hair. The corner of his mouth slightly rose as he said to Yarao, I also miss you very much. This time, we must not be separated again. Yarao choked with sobs and said to Qin Chuan, in this world, no one will be your opponent. We will definitely live happily. Hearing Yarao's words, Qin Chuan was slightly startled in his heart, and his gaze towards Yarao became somewhat subtle. After not seeing each other for several years, Yarao seemed to have undergone a lot of changes. Well, we can talk about old times later. Let's talk about proper business first. Yao Feng looked at Qin Chuan and said to Qin Chuan, congratulations, you've cleaned up the Star Dragon Federation. After the Air Center is taken back, the Star Dragon Federation will be able to develop steadily. With you around, the human race will definitely rise again. Qin Chuan smiled at Yao Feng and said, I hope so. Senior Yao Feng, let's talk as we walk. Qin Chuan and the other two strolled along the riverside. Qin Chuan looked at the greenery in front of him and said to Yao Feng, I have already found the exact locations where the Yao clan seniors were sealed. There are a total of 36 locations. Excluding Tsang Hao, who has already passed away, there are 35 other locations. When Yao Feng heard this, he took a deep look at Qin Chuan and asked, have you investigated these 35 places before? Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said to Yao Feng, I have, but I didn't detect any signs of life. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Yao Feng's heart couldn't help but become heavy. Even with Qin Chuan's current strength, he couldn't detect any signs of life in these 35 locations. This meant that the Yao clan seniors sealed in these 35 locations had most likely already left this world. Qin Chuan looked at Yao Feng guiltily and said, perhaps the only thing I could do was to return the remains of these Yao clan seniors to you. I'm truly sorry. You don't have to blame yourself. It's already very good that you were able to bring the remains of these Yao clan seniors back to the Yao realm. Yao Feng took a deep look at Qin Chuan and said, You've already done enough. I should be the one thanking you." After saying this, Yao Feng let out a long sigh and said to Qin Chuan, "Let's get ready to set off. Before we set off, I have a question that I hope Senior can answer for me." Qin Chuan looked at Yao Feng and said, "I heard from Senior Tsang Hao that he had a wife. In order to help him escape, she went to the Yao realm to ask for help. May I ask if Senior has ever seen Senior Tsang Hao's wife?" Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Yao Feng was stunned. He shook his head and said, "I've never seen Senior Tsang Hao's wife. Perhaps you're talking about something that happened many years ago. Perhaps I wasn't a Yao emperor back then." Although Yao Feng had been a Yao emperor for 1,000 years, Tsang Hao had been sealed for 8,000 years. No one knew when Tsang Hao's wife went to the Yao realm to ask for help. Perhaps it was 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, or perhaps 2,000 years ago. At that time, Yao Feng was just a small Yao. There were many things that he didn't know. When Qin Chuan heard this, a trace of regret appeared on his face. He said to Yao Feng, "Senior Tsang Hao is the main reason I'm able to achieve what I have today. I'm very grateful for Senior Tsang Hao's guidance and contribution over the years. If it's possible, I hope Senior can look into this matter and give me an answer as soon as possible." Yao Feng nodded and said, "All right, I'll look into this matter and give you an answer." Qin Chuan and the other two rode on the Hope and traversed the mountains and rivers of the Star Dragon Federation. In a month's time, they managed to unlock 35 immortal prison charm arrays. Unfortunately, they only managed to retrieve 35 corpses. None of the sealed Yao seniors were able to survive until their return. Even though Qin Chuan's trio had already prepared themselves for this, they still couldn't help but feel sad when they were faced with this cruel reality. Qin Chuan looked at the 35 corpses that were neatly arranged on the Hope's deck and sighed deeply. He turned to Yao Feng and said, "Senior, let the Hope send you back." Yao Feng nodded and said to Qin Chuan, "Thank you for your hard work. It's my duty." Qin Chuan turned to look at Yao Feng and asked, "Senior, have you ever wanted to explore the outside world?" Yao Feng glanced at Qin Chuan and whispered, "When I first saw the Hope, I knew you would want to explore the outside world. Looks like you already have the intention to do so. Then again, you're still young, so you shouldn't be trapped in this small place. You should explore the outside world and see what it's like to see the outside world. However, I'm old now, and I don't have the ambition that I once had. Now I just want to stay in the Yao realm, accompany my wife, watch my daughter grow up, and start a family of my own." Hearing Yao Feng's words, Qin Chuan's eyes slightly flashed. Then he asked Yao Feng, "Senior, are you not willing to let Yao Rao leave with me?" "You're wrong. It's not that I don't want to, it's that Shang Air doesn't want to." Yao Feng sighed. Ever since the incident at the World's Air Center, Shang Air's personality has changed. She no longer wants to explore the outside world. Instead, she wants to live a peaceful life. Can you understand her? Qin Chuan nodded and didn't say anything else. Some things were already clear enough, so there was no point in continuing. Actually, some things were destined the moment they reunited. Some good things would eventually turn into regrets. Chapter 826. In the Hall of Hope, Yao Rao was playing with a bright flower, when suddenly a burst of footsteps sounded behind her. She turned around to look, and when she saw Qin Chuan's figure, her face couldn't help but reveal a happy smile. "Qin Chuan, have you finished chatting with Father Emperor?" Finished chatting." Qin Chuan slowly walked to Yao Rao's side and sat down. Looking at Yao Rao, his gaze was exceptionally complicated. There were some words in his heart that he didn't know how to say to Yao Rao. "Qin Chuan, I heard that the matter of recovering the Kunlun Realm Center doesn't require your hand. So during this period of time, are you free?" Yao Rao looked at Qin Chuan, then said with a smile, "I have a lot of things that I want to talk to you about, and also want to do with you." Qin Chuan faintly smiled, then stretched out his hand and gently stroked Yao Rao's hair. "You speak, I am listening." Being treated so intimately by Qin Chuan, Yao Rao's face couldn't help but slightly blush. She somewhat shyly looked at Qin Chuan, then said in a low voice, "Now that the world is peaceful, I think, can we start our new life? Have you ever thought about where we are going to hold our wedding? Do you want to hold it according to the customs of your human race, or according to the customs of our monster race? Or do you want to hold it according to both customs? What do you think? I have always been looking forward to the wedding. As early as many years ago, I wanted to build our little family together with you. I also secretly learned embroidery behind the back of Father Emperor and Mother Empress, and made a wedding dress for myself, as well as a pair of embroidered shoes. As for your clothes, I haven't had the time to make them, but I will definitely have them in the future. What do you think is suitable for us to settle down after we get married? If it was in the demon realm, although it would be very convenient for me, it would be too far away from the Star Dragon Federation. It would be very troublesome for you to meet your friends and teachers, but if you settled in the Star Dragon Federation, you would be far away from Father Emperor and Mother. I thought about it again, and suddenly thought that maybe the mountain city is a very good choice. This way, no matter where it is, it won't be too far away. We can go wherever we want. Your godmother will be there. She will definitely be of great help to our new home. Also, don't make the decoration of our house too complicated. I like the simple style, like. As she spoke, tears suddenly rolled down from her enchanting eyes. Choking with sobs, she continued, I also want to have 2 children with you, a boy and a girl. Qin Chuan. Yao Rao suddenly lowered her head, raised her hand to cover her face, and began to weep bitterly. Her body couldn't stop trembling. Although there were some things that no one said, but how could Yao Rao, with her keen mind, not be aware of it? Looking at the crying appearance of Yao Rao, Qin Chuan's eyes also became moist. His voice was somewhat hoarse as he said to Yao Rao. Yao Rao suddenly threw herself into the bosom of Qin Chuan, hugged Qin Chuan, and cried loudly. While crying, she said to Qin Chuan, I heard from them that you want to take the hope to go to the outside world and leave the land of exile, but the outside world is really dangerous. We have experienced so many hardships and finally settled down with great difficulty. Don't tell me we can't live a peaceful and comfortable life. Yao Rao raised her head and looked at Qin Chuan with her hazy, tearful eyes. Choking with sobs, she said, Qin Chuan, don't go, okay? Let's stay here. You can live in the Star Dragon Federation if you want. I can promise you anything. I'm begging you. I've never begged you before. Can you promise me this time? Let me be willful for once. Facing Yao Rao's urging to stay, Qin Chuan felt his heart was about to break, but this wasn't the life he wanted. Rao, have you ever thought that Zerg's invasion hasn't completely ended? This is just the beginning. Wait until Zerg's next invasion. What should we do? Zerg's strength is beyond our imagination. Do you understand? I don't want to listen to this. This is something that hasn't happened yet. Why should we think so much? People who don't think far ahead will have immediate worries. Qin Chuan. Yao Rao suddenly interrupted Qin Chuan with a loud voice. She looked at Qin Chuan. Her gaze was filled with pain, and choking with sobs, she said, Why can you understand so many people, but can't understand me? I don't want you to shoulder the burden of humanity's future, and also don't want you to go through those dangerous things. I only want to live a peaceful life with you. Pass our world. I really don't want to separate from you. Seeing Yao Rao's mood was already close to collapse, Qin Chuan took a deep breath, then asked Yao Rao, We cannot separate, but are you willing to go to the outside world with me? I swear on my life, I will definitely protect you, and absolutely won't let you suffer any harm. Having heard what was said, Yao Rao shook her head and said, If I leave, what about Father Emperor? What about Mother Empress? Hearing Yao Rao's question, the expression on Qin Chuan's face couldn't help but become extremely painful. At this moment, he finally realized that he couldn't persuade Yao Rao, and similarly, Yao Rao also couldn't persuade him. Seeing Qin Chuan silent, Yao Rao seemed to have realized something. She slowly loosened the hand that was hugging Qin Chuan. Then looking at Qin Chuan with miserable eyes, she asked, So, we still have to separate, right? Hearing Yao Rao's words, the scene of their first meeting in carefree secret realm suddenly appeared in Qin Chuan's mind. He had secretly kissed Yao Rao, and thought that heaven and earth didn't know, but he didn't expect that everything was seen by Yao Rao. He thought of their meeting again in Mountain City, and the sweetness of that moment was still lingering in his mind. Dragon and Phoenix beside the bonfire of Pegasus Inn. risking his life to save her in Heavenly Phoenix Plain, the oath made on Heavenly Demon Mountain, saying that they would stay together forever, never leaving each other in the center of Kunlun realm. All kinds of past appeared in Qinchuan's mind, as if a carousel lantern, just like a sweet love movie. There were laughter and also tears, sweet and happy. But after experiencing all kinds of things, all of these finally became eternal memories. Two people who had once had their souls connected finally had differences. Qinchuan slightly closed his eyes. He didn't dare to look at Yaorao's current expression. At this very moment, the only thing he could do was to apologize to Yaorao. I'm sorry. Hearing Qinchuan's response, Yaorao couldn't help but painfully closed her eyes. Then turning around, she ran towards the outside of the hall. After Yaorao's figure went far away, Baiyu's figure slowly appeared behind Qinchuan. She wanted to comfort Qinchuan, but in the end, she decided to let Qinchuan calm down by himself. At this time, what she needed to do was to look at Qinchuan from afar and quietly guard him. Chapter 827. Originally, everyone thought that Yaorao would stay by Qinchuan's side, but unexpectedly, Yaorao left Star Dragon Federation together with Yao Feng. Moreover, when they left, Qinchuan didn't even go to see them off. This made everyone realize that something must have happened between Qinchuan and Yaorao. After Gao and understood the relationship between Qinchuan and Yaorao, he couldn't help but sigh, then said to everyone, Qinchuan is a lord who is suitable to pursue the great Tao. Hearing Gao sigh, everyone's face revealed a subtle expression. After seeing Yaorao off, Lu Zi returned to Elf City. In the garden of the office, she saw Qinchuan, who was appreciating the flowers. She looked at Qinchuan straight back and said softly, she left, she didn't leave behind any words and also didn't leave behind anything. Hearing Lu Zi's words, Qinchuan slowly turned around and looked at Lu Zi, then asked in a low voice, did I do wrong? Seeing Qinchuan's perplexed and painful expression, Lu Zi couldn't help but feel somewhat distressed. She said to Qinchuan in a soft voice, everyone should have their own persistence and choice. You only persisted in the ideal that you wanted to pursue. You didn't do anything wrong. She also persisted in the ideal that she wanted to pursue. You didn't do anything wrong. Neither of you did anything wrong. In a matter of love, there was no right or wrong. If a dispute that couldn't be resolved appeared in love, in order to avoid continuing to hurt each other, the best choice was to separate. A short pain was better than a long pain. Having heard what was said, Qinchuan looked at Lu Zi with a complicated expression, then said softly, I asked a lot of people, whether it was Chongqing, Long Xiao, or even Teacher, they didn't think of leaving Star Dragon Federation. Their thoughts were the same as Yaorao's. After experiencing so much, they only pursued a peaceful and stable life. While speaking, Qinchuan somewhat hesitantly asked Lu Zi, what about you? What's your answer? Lu Zi smiled and said to Qinchuan, you know what my choice is, but you want to hear it from me, right? I can tell you right now that my choice is you. No matter where you go, be it a mountain of blades or a sea of flames, be it heaven or hell, I will be with you. Life or death, we'll be together. After saying that, Lu Zi slowly walked to Qinchuan's side. She looked at Qinchuan seriously and said softly, I'm not saying this because I want you to make any promises, and I've never wanted you to give me anything. I just want to tell you that I'm willing to walk down this path with you. Regardless of the outcome, this is the best outcome for me. Thank you, little Z. After Yi Ting and the other three adjusted themselves, the Star Dragon Federation launched a counterattack on the air center. Although the counterattack wasn't smooth, they didn't encounter any danger. In less than half a month, they took back the air center and completely wiped out Zerg. This made Goen, who was nervous because he thought Zerg's reinforcements would arrive, let out a long sigh of relief. At this point, the threat of Zerg was temporarily resolved. As for whether Zerg would do it again in the future, no one knew. After receiving this news, Qinchuan finally decided to leave the land of exile in a month and go to the depths of the universe to find a new world. In the study, Ningyu sat on a chair and looked at Qinchuan, standing in front of her. Her eyes were full of reluctance. Have you really confirmed it? Do you have to go out and explore? Is the Star Dragon Federation no longer able to tolerate you? Hearing Ningya's words, Qin Xuan pursed his lips and replied, Teacher, you know me. I'm not a person who likes to live an easy life. I know that you're the same as your father. You're confident and wild in your bones. You both yearn for a wider world and don't want to be a frog at the bottom of a well. Ningya sighed. When I discovered your extraordinary talent, I guessed that this day would come. I just didn't expect it to come so early. Ningya originally thought that Qin Xuan would need decades, or even centuries, to get to where he was today. However, Qin Xuan's abnormal opportunities and talent allowed him to reach a height that others might not be able to reach in their lifetime in less than 10 years. This also caused the young Qin Xuan to be dissatisfied with the current situation and yearn for a wider world and a brighter future. Teacher, I'll definitely come back in the future. If you can successfully reach the outside world, I believe that with your talent, you'll definitely be able to make a name for yourself. You'll also have the opportunity to return home in glory. However, I'm worried that you'll encounter danger not long after you leave the land of exile. Do you know? Over the years, countless ancestors have tried to leave this world like you. But after they left, no news came back. They might be enjoying themselves in the outside world, but it's more likely that they've fallen in the universe. Hearing Ningya's words, Qin Xuan could not help but fall silent. He knew all the dangers that Ningya mentioned, but there were some things that he would not be willing to give up without trying. Seeing the expression on Qin Xuan's face, Ningya knew that her persuasion this time had ended in failure. She sighed and said to Qin Xuan, Forget it. I won't persuade you anymore. Do whatever you want, but remember, if you encounter danger, retreat if you have a chance. Don't try to be brave. Qin Xuan nodded and said to Ningya, I know. By the way, Lu Zi also wants to leave with you. Ningya looked at Qin Xuan with a subtle gaze. Don't you plan to meet Lu Zi's grandfather and explain this matter? Grandpa, don't be angry. Lu Zi looked at Lu Xiangyang, who was sulking on the chair with a straight face. She was really helpless. Grandpa cannot be angry, but you have to promise me that you won't go with that brat. Grandpa only has one granddaughter. If something happens to you, what should I do? Lu Xiangyang looked at Lu Zi. Aren't you afraid that no one will send me off in the future? Lu Zi immediately said, Grandpa, don't worry. Chongqing and Xiao Xiao are both very good friends of mine. They can send you off in the future. When Lu Xiangyang heard Lu Zi's words, he almost died of anger. She couldn't wait for him to die quickly. At this time, Lu Zi also realized that she had said something wrong. When she was about to remedy it, Qin Xuan's figure appeared outside the door. He said to Lu Xiangyang, Grandpa Lu, I'm here to see you. Seeing Qin Xuan's figure, Lu Xiangyang was immediately furious. He shouted at Qin Xuan, Brat, you still have the guts to appear in front of me? Do you think that you can be unscrupulous just because I'm at the late gold core stage and I'm no match for you? Qin Xuan smiled bitterly and said to Lu Xiangyang, You can hit me. I promise I won't fight back. Chapter 828. A month passed by quickly. After settling everything, Qin Xuan was finally going to embark on a journey to the depths of the universe with Lu Zi. On this day, Qin Xuan rejected all of his friends and family who wanted to see him off. Other than him and Lu Zi, only Yi Ting and the other three were present. Yi Ting looked at Qin Xuan, who was standing on the deck of the Hope, and a trace of envy flashed through his eyes. He said to Qin Xuan, I hope you can live well, because when I have the opportunity to take this step, I will have the opportunity to live and see what the other side of the universe is like. If even you die, then there will be no hope for the rest of us. Qin Xuan, you must not die. Chen Wujin and Yi Ting had the same thought. If Qin Xuan died, then it would mean that all of their years of waiting had been nothing but a pipe dream. They would directly collapse because of this. Don't worry, I cherish my life more than any of you. Qin Xuan smiled. You all should protect the Star Dragon Federation well, and strive to meet up with me outside as soon as possible. Qin Xuan, this is what you wanted. Shimin Weiyang passed a thick book to Qin Chuan. All of our understanding of the exiled land and the outside world is in here. You can take a look. Perhaps it will be of some help to you. Qin Chuan carefully accepted the book from Shimin Weiyang and said seriously, I will definitely treasure it and study it carefully. Qin Chuan, I have nothing good to give you, but I can give you a piece of advice. Qin Fenghua looked deeply at Qin Chuan. You have to be mentally prepared to become the weakest person. Qin Chuan heard this and looked deeply at Qin Fenghua. I will. After a brief farewell, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi boarded the Hope. With a flash of green, the Hope disappeared from everyone's sight. Seeing the Hope disappear, the group couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. They had seen a new adventurer embark on a new journey, and no one knew what the end of this journey would be. In fact, they didn't even know if they would be able to reach the end. The depths of the cosmos were unknown, and this was something to look forward to and fear from. As Qin Chuan left, in Star Dragon City, Long Shao stood on top of the city wall and looked to the east with a complicated expression. Chen Changxing, who was standing beside Long Shao, gently nodded. He sighed and said with some regret, I knew long ago that boss was different from us. But at that time, I didn't know what the difference was. But now I know. Our life will definitely be peaceful and happy. But in terms of the degree of excitement, even if there are 100 of us, we still can't compare to boss. Hearing Chen Changxing's words, Long Shao nodded in agreement and said to Chen Changxing, this is his choice and also our choice. No one is right and no one is wrong. It's just some regret. Perhaps it will be difficult to see him again in the future. No, I believe boss will definitely come back. Chen Changxing grinned. Boss will definitely return in glory. Long Shao looked at Chen Changxing with some curiosity and asked, why do you say so? Because boss once promised me that he will be my son's godfather. If he doesn't come back, then wouldn't my son lose his godfather? Chen Changxing smiled. Boss is not a person who goes back on his words. Demon Realm, Heavenly Demon Mountain. Yao Rao sat on the edge of the cliff in a daze, looking at the light in the distant sky. No one knew what she was thinking. Snow Chio slowly walked over from behind, sat down beside Yao Rao, then said to Yao Rao in a low voice, he has already left, entered the universe and walked to the other side of the universe. Hearing Snow Chio, a touch of bitter expression slowly appeared on Yao Rao's expressionless face, then said to Snow Chio in a low voice, in the end, he still left. Isn't this something that has long been expected? Snow Chio sighed. Raoer, no matter what decision you made at that time, I and your father Emperor will definitely fully support you. Hearing Snow Chio, Yao Rao buried her head in her arms, then said in a somewhat gloomy voice, Mother Empress, I know what you said. I just want to know whether the bright future is more important in his heart, or I am more important. I lost. Having heard Yao Rao, Snow Chio looked at Yao Rao somewhat helplessly. Some things can't stand the test. While speaking, Snow Chio took out a storage ring from her sleeve and handed it over to Yao Rao, then said to Yao Rao, this is the thing he had someone send over. He asked us to give it to you. If you don't want it, then throw it away. Looking at the storage ring in the hand of Snow Chio, Yao Rao slowly raised her head and looked at the storage ring in the hand of Snow Chio. After hesitating for a moment, she reached out and took the storage ring. After using her thought to perceive the thing inside the storage ring, her eyes couldn't help but turn red. Inside the storage ring, there was a photo. In the photo, a youngster wearing the uniform of Qing State Capital No. 2 High School. His appearance looked somewhat small, cold, and also somewhat thin and weak. This was the Qin Chuan that Yao Rao had never seen before. On the deck of Hope, Qin Chuan looked at Man and Bai Wei standing in front of him, then said to them, you are free. You can do whatever you want. Qin Chuan didn't have the intention to let Bai Wei and Man accompany him to the depths of the universe. They had met in the universe, so they would also bid farewell in the universe. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Bai Wei lightly nodded, then said to Qin Chuan, thank you for taking care of me and Star Fox Clan all this time. Man looked at Qin Chuan with complicated gaze, then asked, hey, could it be that you really aren't afraid of death? Qin Chuan deeply looked at Man and said, if I was afraid of death, then I wouldn't have appeared here. Man wasn't the first person to ask Qinchuan this question, but perhaps she would be the last. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Man hesitated for a moment, then said to Qinchuan, "In the universe, if you come across red space battleship, then you must try your best to stay away from them." Hearing Man's words, Qinchuan, somewhat surprised, looked at Man, then asked, "Why do you say so? Also, what do you know about it?" "This is not what I know, but the inheritance deep in the memory of our barbarian wolf clan. Barbarian wolf clan must stay away from red space battleship when they come across it. This is a warning left to us by our ancestors." Man said to Qinchuan, "As for more than that, I don't know. Although I've been wandering in the universe for hundreds of years and have never seen red space battleship, but it is never wrong to be careful. Thank you for your reminder. This is very precious information." Qinchuan looked at Man. "Stay away from red space battleship. I will definitely remember." Chapter 829. This was the Hope's first month in space. Other than encountering a few groups of star beasts, the Hope hadn't encountered anything else. In this 1 month's time, LVZ was diligently cultivating every day, and Qinchuan was holding the book Shimin Weiyang had given him and was studying the information about the outside world. Most of the things recorded in the book were the guesses of Shimin Weiyang and others about the outside world. There were very few things that were truly useful, but Qinchuan was still reading with great interest. So it wasn't someone who invented a new language during the Age of Chaos for the human and demon race to use. This language has always existed. Qinchuan looked at the records in the book and couldn't help but reveal an extremely shocked expression. He didn't expect there to be such a secret regarding language. If the writing and language of the human race and the demon race are the same, doesn't that mean that the human race and the demon race have already achieved the same writing and writing many years ago? Perhaps not only the human and demon race, but also the entire universe. The origin of the name Banished Land is quite unique. According to legends, the Banished Land is a place used to banish races that have committed serious crimes. Could it be that the human and demon race used to live in the outside world and were banished here because they committed serious crimes? Reading through the book's records and speculations, Qinchuan's confusion grew. At the same time, his curiosity about the outside world grew. Just as Qinchuan was thinking about these things, the Hope suddenly trembled slightly. However, it soon became more intense, like an earthquake. Sensing the Hope's abnormal reaction, Qinchuan immediately stood up. At the same time, Baiyu's figure appeared before him. She said in a serious tone, "A whirlpool suddenly appeared at the bottom of the Hope. This whirlpool's suction force is very strong. The Hope is having a hard time moving." Qinchuan's face flashed with shock. He asked, "The Hope can't escape from this whirlpool?" Just as Qinchuan asked this question, Lu Zi, who was cultivating in the cabin, walked out and asked in confusion, "What happened?" Baiyu briefly explained the situation to Lu Zi before turning to Qinchuan. "I've tried, but the Hope is unable to escape from this whirlpool. Furthermore, as the whirlpool grows bigger and bigger, there's a high chance we'll be sucked into it." Lu Zi frowned slightly and asked, "What's behind the whirlpool?" "I don't know." Baiyu shook her head. "This is the first time we've entered the depths of the universe. I'm not sure either." Hearing Baiyu's answer, Lu Zi knew she had asked a stupid question. She looked at Baiyu and asked, "Can you put the Hope away? After all, the Hope is too big. It would be bad if the Hope was damaged." Baiyu shook her head. "If this was before we encountered this whirlpool, I might have been able to do that, but now I can't. This whirlpool is restricting me." Qinchuan and LVZ's expressions became somewhat gloomy. They had only been in the universe for a month, and they had already encountered such a situation. It was too vexing. "None of us know what's behind this whirlpool, so I suggest the two of you leave the Hope temporarily. If there's no danger behind the whirlpool, I'll try to contact you." Baiyu looked at Qinchuan and Lu Zi. "The Hope will be trapped, but there's still a chance for the two of you to leave." Hearing Baiyu's words, Qinchuan rejected Baiyu's suggestion without even thinking. He shook his head and said, "No, let's not talk about abandoning our companions. If you can't get out of the vortex, LVZ, and I can only survive in the universe for 3 to 5 days at most. There are too many uncertainties and too much danger. Our best choice now is to face this vortex together. No matter what is behind the vortex, we have to face it. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Lu Zi and Bai Yu fell silent. Behind the whirlpool might be another world or death, but no matter what, they couldn't escape from it. As the whirlpool grew bigger and bigger, the hope was finally swallowed whole. When the hope entered the whirlpool, it only lasted for a few seconds before disappearing. It was as if nothing had happened. Qinchuan felt his head grow heavy. It felt like he was traveling through time and space. His soul and body seemed to be separated, and the connection between them was lost. Just as Qinchuan was trying his best to wake himself up and regain his composure, an ear-piercing laughter suddenly rang out in his ears. He's awake. Ha ha! I bet this kid will be the first to wake up. I've won. Mother Faster's cur, I'm so unlucky. Stop talking nonsense. Hand over the money. Hand over all your star coins. Amidst the loud laughter, Qinchuan slowly opened his eyes and looked in front of him. In front of him, there was a black furry thing that was swaying nonstop. Before Qinchuan could see what it was, a ferocious face covered in fur suddenly appeared in front of him. It looked like a cat. Kid, don't you know it's rude to stare at other people's buttocks? Qinchuan looked at the figure in front of him and felt the aura that was as vast as the ocean coming from him. He couldn't help but reveal a trace of shock on his face. Qinchuan was sure that if this person wanted to kill him, it would only need a finger to crush him to death. What are you looking at? Kid. Hearing the other party's joking voice, Qinchuan suddenly realized that he could understand the other party's language. However, that wasn't the most important thing right now. He needed to know the situation of Bai Yu and Lu Zi. Where are my companions? If you're referring to the girl and the ship, then they're over there. The black cat pointed a finger with a sharp nail at Qinchuan's side. Qinchuan turned to look at the unconscious Lu Zi and the hope. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. Everyone was fine. Kid, what race are you? The black cat reached out and pinched Qinchuan's face. You look like a human from the legends, but your bloodline doesn't seem to belong to the human race. How strange. Could it be that you're just a humanoid? Qinchuan did not quite understand what the black cat was saying, but he could roughly tell that the black cat had no intention of killing him for the time being. He turned his gaze towards the strange faces around him and felt the astonishing energy fluctuations coming from these people. Pursing his lips, he asked, "Where is this place?" The black cat laughed wickedly and said to Qinchuan, "Friend, this is the Red Sail pirate ship. Welcome." Chapter 830. Red Sail Pirate Ship? Hearing this name, Qinchuan subconsciously looked around. When he saw the dark red battleships with red skull flags parked not far away, his pupils couldn't help but shrink, revealing a hint of shock in his eyes. It turned out that the red battleships Man mentioned earlier were the Red Sail pirate ship. Although this was Qinchuan's first time coming into contact with space pirates, and he didn't know much about them. He knew what they did just by hearing their names. Now that they had fallen into their hands, Qinchuan didn't even need to think to know that they wouldn't have a good ending. That vortex is your doing. Qinchuan looked at the black cat standing in front of him, his eyes full of vigilance. Little guy, don't you think it's too late for you to realize it now? The black cat grinned at Qinchuan. That's our Red Sail pirate ship's newest technology, the teleportation trap. As long as your ship comes into contact with the teleportation trap, you'll be sent to the location set up by us Red Sail pirate ship. We originally wanted to catch a big shot, but we didn't expect to only catch a few little kittens like you. While speaking, the black cat stretched out a finger and hooked Qinchuan's chin, laughing sinisterly. Guess how we'll treat you? Of course we'll eat you, ha! Behind the black cat, a burst of extremely savage laughter rang out. Soon after, the laughter joined together as everyone joined in. The appearances of these people were extremely peculiar. Some of them had 3 hands, some of them had 4 legs, and some of them even had a single thick leg and a vertical eye. However, appearances were secondary. What truly terrified Qin Chuan was that every single one of these people's aura was stronger than his. This woman and that special ship should be able to sell for a good price. As for this kid, I think he'd better go to the bar. No, no, no. He can't go to the bar. That's too easy for those drunkards. I think we should just eat meat. Hearing these people's frightening words, Qin Chuan forced himself to calm down and asked the black cat, "What do you want for you to let us go?" "Let you go?" The black cat seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world and laughed loudly. "You're really interesting, baby. You're the first person to come to our red sail pirate ship's territory and still want to leave safely. Huh? That's right, that's right. If we let you go just like that, wouldn't we lose face?" "Don't talk nonsense, Captain. Kill him." Listening to the crowd's clamor, Qin Chuan's heart sank. At this moment, he finally understood why Qin Fenghua reminded him to be mentally prepared to be the weakest. Although he was already mentally prepared, he couldn't remain calm in the face of such a situation. He had to think of a way out of this situation. Just as Qin Chuan was trying his best to think of a way to get out of this predicament, the little black cat suddenly reached out and untied the ropes around his body. Just as Qin Chuan was in shock, the little black cat stretched out its hand and pointed towards a huge vat not too far away and said to Qin Chuan, "Kid, if you want to suffer less, go to that vat yourself." Hearing that, Qin Chuan subconsciously turned his gaze towards the vat that the little black cat was pointing at. When he saw the large vat that was filled with boiling water, his face immediately darkened. "What? You don't want to? Want to resist?" The black cat smiled and looked at Qin Chuan with a teasing gaze and said to Qin Chuan, "I don't mind giving you a chance to struggle." Hearing the black cat's words, Qin Chuan immediately gave up on struggling. He knew very well that with his insignificant strength, he was no match for the black cat. Struggling was equivalent to dying faster. Now, he could only listen to the black cat's arrangements so that he could live a little longer and better think of a way to get out of the situation. Just as Qin Chuan was about to walk towards the vat, a soft voice suddenly rang out by his ear. "Qin Chuan, don't go." Hearing this voice, Qin Chuan immediately turned his head to look at Lu Zi and asked with concern, "You're awake? How do you feel?" Lu Zi shook her head and said to Qin Chuan, "I'm fine. Don't listen to them. You'll die." TSK, TSK, TSK. What a touching sentiment. But do you think he can live if he doesn't go over? The black cat sneered, "How naive. And I love torturing naive people the most." As it spoke, the black cat raised its foot and walked towards Lu Zi. Seeing this, Qin Chuan could no longer hold himself back and raised his hand towards the black cat. However, before he could attack, a terrifying force suddenly struck him and threw him to the ground. With a loud bang, his internal organs were all shattered. Puffed. Qin Chuan could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood mixed with pieces of his internal organs. He felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on his body, immobilizing him. Even moving his eyes had become an extremely difficult task. Lu Zi saw how the black cat had severely injured Qin Chuan with a single blow, and her expression turned to one of extreme agony. She shouted at Qin Chuan, "Qin Chuan, are you all right? He won't be able to speak." The black cat smiled and said to Lu Zi, "Don't worry. I won't kill him because dead meat won't be fresh anymore. I won't kill you either because I still want to sell you for a good price." As it spoke, the black cat had already walked to Lu Zi's side. It grinned wickedly and used its finger to gently stroke Lu Zi's delicate cheek. It said to Lu Zi, "But before I sell you, I want to make a mark on your body." Just as the black cat was about to stab its finger into Lu Zi's cheek, a violent roar suddenly came from outside, and the entire ground shook. "Captain, we're under attack. It's the Iron Rose unit under Madame Angel." A series of shouts came from outside, causing the black cat to stop what it was doing. "That's impossible. Our secret base has the ability to block all detection signals. It's impossible for it to be discovered." The black cat yelled, "Damn it! Could there be a traitor among us? You can indeed block all detection signals, but you can't block out powerful life auras." At this moment, an extremely cold voice rang in the black cat's ears. The black cat subconsciously turned its head to look at the person who spoke and could not help but be stunned. Because the person who spoke was actually the artifact soul that they had neglected, Baiyu. Just as the black cat was about to question Baiyu, there was another rumble. A huge silver-white battleship smashed through the dome, and a large amount of rubble fell down, causing the joyous scene to instantly turn into a chaotic mess. Red Sail Pirates, you actually dare to target Madam Angel. You've committed a heinous crime and deserve to be killed. Hearing this angry roar, the black cat's expression immediately turned ugly. It shouted, "Brothers, board the ship. We're counterattacking." Chapter 831. At this time, facing Steel Rose's attack, the Red Sail Pirates could no longer care about Qinchuan and the other two. They hurriedly rushed to their respective warships and piloted their pirate ships to launch a counterattack against Steel Rose. A fierce battle began. Amidst the roar of cannon fire and the collision of spirit power, Qinchuan climbed up from the ground with great difficulty. He glanced at Lu Zi, who was still tied to a pillar, gritted his teeth, stood up, and slowly walked to Lu Zi's side. Lu Zi looked at Qinchuan's pale face, and her eyes reddened. She said to Qinchuan, "I'm sorry, I harmed you." "Don't say this, I'm fine." Qinchuan frowned at the rope on Lu Zi's body. He found that he couldn't untie the rope. Lu Zi glanced at the flames exploding around them and said to Qinchuan, "Don't worry about me, go. Cut the crap." Qinchuan said fiercely, "I brought you out. How can I not care about you?" While speaking, Qinchuan took out the Silver River Sword and slashed at the rope. However, even with the sharpness of the Silver River Sword, it couldn't cause any damage to the rope. The material of this rope is very special. It seems to require extremely powerful spirit power to untie it. Baiyu easily got rid of the rope as a weapon soul. She said to Qinchuan, "Let's stay here and wait for Steel Rose's people to rescue us." Hearing Baiyu's words, Qinchuan asked with some doubt, "You know Steel Rose's people?" Baiyu shook her head and said to Qinchuan, "Although I don't know them, don't forget that I'm now a warship. They can contact me through the radar system. I released a powerful life force as a signal to lead them here." Hearing Baiyu's explanation, Qinchuan's face showed a touch of understanding. Just as he was about to say something, a bomb suddenly exploded behind him. The powerful impact caused his body to slam into Lu Zi's body. The two of them groaned at the same time and fainted. Qinchuan didn't know how long he was unconscious for. When he woke up, he found himself lying in a quiet bedroom. The room was filled with a fresh fragrance, like rose perfume. Qinchuan sat up and tried to move his body. He realized that the injuries on his body had completely recovered, and there were no hidden injuries left behind. Even the hidden injuries that had been left behind in his body due to his previous injuries had been resolved. Just as Qinchuan was surprised, the bedroom door was suddenly opened from the outside. A tall woman in a tight, red outfit slowly walked in. She looked at Qinchuan calmly. "You're awake?" Qinchuan looked at the person who suddenly walked in and asked, "Did you save me? Are my companions all right?" "Your companions are all fine. They just haven't woken up yet." The tall woman looked at Qinchuan and said, "I'm Sophie, the adjutant of Steel Rose under Madam Angel. You can call me Adjutant Sophie." Qinchuan heard this and said to Sophie, "Thank you for saving my life, Adjutant Sophie." "No need to thank me. Since those stinky space pirates dared to target Madam Angel, they should have been prepared to be killed by us." Sophie's expression suddenly turned cold when she mentioned the Red Sail space pirates. She said in a deep voice, "They were lucky to escape this time, but they won't be so lucky next time." Seeing Sophie's angry look, Qinchuan opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. "Since you're awake, get ready to leave." Sophie looked at Qinchuan. "Our Steel Rose is full of women. We never receive men. You're an exception. To be honest, if you hadn't provided us with the location of those space pirates, we wouldn't even have saved you." Faced with Sophie's indifferent attitude, Qinchuan was silent for a moment before he asked Sophie, "I can leave, but can my two companions stay? They're both women. They should be within the range of your Steel Rose's reception." Hearing Qinchuan's words, Sophie raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, "Why do you want them to stay?" Qin Chuan pursed his lips and answered seriously, "Because I'm too weak. I can't protect them." Just a month ago, he was still the strongest man in the entire land of exile. But after leaving the Star Dragon Federation, he immediately became the weakest person in the outside world. Even with Qin Chuan's tough mentality, he found it hard to accept such a huge drop. He was powerless to protect Lu Zi and Bai Yu in the outside world. If possible, letting Lu Zi and Bai Yu stay in the Steel Rose was the best choice. Although admitting his weakness hurt Qin Chuan's self-esteem, he had to learn to lower his head and compromise when faced with the bloody reality. Because the current him was indeed a weakling through and through. A weakling who couldn't even protect himself. "You're quite self-aware." Sophie looked at Qin Chuan. "I agree to your request. They can stay in the Steel Rose and be incorporated into the new army for training, but you have to leave at the next starport. I'll give you some star coins, enough for you to live anywhere for a month." Qin Chuan was very grateful to Sophie. "Thank you. No need to thank me. It's just a small matter for me. You, on the other hand, should think about your future path. I'll give you a friendly reminder. No matter how poor or bitter you are, don't become a galactic pirate. Once you become a rat that everyone spurns, you won't have the chance to raise your head again in this life." After arranging everything, Sophie turned and left. Qin Chuan laid down on the bed again, a hint of confusion appearing in his eyes. Now that he really came into contact with the outside world, he didn't know where he should go. Buzz! The hatch slowly opened. Qin Chuan walked out of the spacecraft and stood on the port. He looked at the passage ahead, took a deep breath, turned to Sophie, and said, "Adjutant Sophie, please take good care of my friends. Thank you again for your help." Sophie nodded gently and said to Qin Chuan, "You don't have to worry about this. You should take care of yourself first. Goodbye." After the hatch slowly closed, Qin Chuan watched the spacecraft leave and drive into the starry sky. Only then did he turn and walk out of the corridor. When he reached the end of the corridor, he was stopped by two port staff in armor. "Sir, please show me your identification." Hearing the staff's words, Qin Chuan was slightly taken aback and asked, "What will happen if I don't have identification?" The staff replied coldly, "You'll be treated as a stowaway and exiled to the bottom of the city." Chapter 832. Qin Chuan did not expect to see the filth and poverty of the outside world before he even saw the prosperity of the outside world. Qin Chuan stood on the slightly narrow street and looked at the low and old buildings around him. He could not help but reveal a subtle look in his eyes. The environment here reminded him of the time he spent in the slums of the state capital of Qing. "This will be another new starting point for me." Qin Chuan stepped forward and walked through the puddles according to the instructions of the port staff. He walked to the personnel registration area and looked at the fat figure sleeping on the table. He reached out and gently knocked on the table. "Hello, I'm here to register." As Qin Chuan's voice fell, the fat figure did not respond at all. Seeing this, Qin Chuan could only helplessly reach out and push the other party. Only then did the other party show signs of waking up. "Who are you?" The fat figure slowly raised his head and looked at Qin Chuan as he asked in a somewhat muffled voice. Qin Chuan slightly pursed his lips and replied, "I'm here to register as a stowaway." Hearing Qin Chuan's reply, the fat figure grinned and revealed his yellow teeth. "So you're stowaway. Fill in this form." Qin Chuan looked at the form handed over by the fat man. After a cursory glance, he asked, "Brother..." Qin Chuan looked at the fat man who had already laid down and started to sleep again. Was this guy sleepy in his previous life? Otherwise, how could he sleep so well now? "What's the matter now?" The fat man looked up at Qin Chuan and said impatiently, "Don't call me brother. My name is Wang Fei. Call me Brother Fei." Qin Chuan glanced at Wang Fei's body. It would be strange if this body could fly. However, this was just Qin Chuan's thought. He would not say it out loud. He looked at Wang Fei and asked, "Brother Fei, how should I fill in this form?" Wang Fei glanced at the form in Qin Chuan's hand and said to Qin Chuan, This is your work form. Fill it out, and you can wait in line for work. When you have accumulated 100 work points, you can apply for an identity certificate and become an official citizen of the Sen estate. After hearing Wang Fei's explanation, Qin Chuan learned a lot of information. First of all, he couldn't start work immediately after filling in the form. He had to wait in line. Second, he needed 100 work points to get an Idaho for himself. Last but not least, he was now in a place called Senna. Brother Fei, what kind of jobs do we have here? Also, how long do I need to earn 1 work point? How long will it take to line up? Qin Chuan had too many questions that he wanted to ask Wang Fei. However, he could only choose the most important questions for now. Why do you have so many questions? Wang Fei looked displeased. He said to Qin Chuan, "Isn't it written on the form?" You can find a total of 4 jobs right now, and they are respectively maintenance of machinery, street cleaning, talisman formation master's assistant, and experimental subjects. As for the work points, you can get different work points for different jobs. For example, you can only get 1 work point if you assist in the maintenance of 10 large machines. For example, you can get 1 work point if you clean the streets for 100 days. For example, you can get 1 work point if you help a talisman formation master inscribe 10 talisman formations. For experimental subjects, you can get 10 work points if you participate in 1 experiment. At the end, Wang Fei chuckled and said to Qin Chuan, "I see that your physique is not bad. If you want to quickly earn work points, you could become an experimental subject. You only need to participate in 10 experiments, and you'll be able to earn 100 work points. Thank you for your kindness, Brother Fei, but I don't intend to be a guinea pig." Qin Chuan didn't have to guess to know that being a guinea pig was absolutely not something fun. Perhaps he would be transformed into a monster that was neither human nor ghost. Wang Fei was instantly slightly discouraged when he heard this, and he seemed to have lost interest in conversing with Qin Chuan. He said lazily, "Then you can choose the other 3 jobs yourself. There's no requirement for street cleaning. A Grade 2 certificate of equipment refinement is required for maintenance of machinery, and a Grade 3 certificate of talisman formation master is required for a Grade 3 certificate of talisman formation master. You probably don't have any of these, right?" When he heard Wang Fei, Qin Chuan asked with slight curiosity, "How can I obtain the certificate of talisman formation master?" When Wang Fei heard Qin Chuan, he raised his head to glance at Qin Chuan and asked with slight bewilderment, "You're a Grade 3 talisman formation master?" Qin Chuan shook his head, and right when Wang Fei lost interest and was about to lie down, he replied, "I'm a Grade 4 talisman formation master." "Kid, you're really a Grade 4 talisman formation master? Don't lie to me." Wang Fei looked at the branch office of the Talisman Formation Master Association before him, and he couldn't help but question Qin Chuan once more. Qin Chuan said to Wang Fei with slight helplessness when he heard this, "Brother Fei, this is already the 10th time you've asked me. I'm really a Grade 4 Talisman Formation Master." When he heard Qin Chuan's confirmation, Wang Fei was slightly bewildered. "You're a dignified Grade 4 Talisman Formation Master, and you could be considered to be a formidable figure on a remote planet in the countryside. How did you become a stowaway?" Qin Chuan laughed bitterly and said to Wang Fei, "It's a long story. If it's a long story, then let's not talk about it. Come, let's go in." Wang Fei dragged Qin Chuan along as he walked towards the branch office of the Talisman Formation Master Association, and they were stopped by the security guards at the entrance. "Unauthorized personnel are prohibited from entering." Wang Fei chuckled when he heard this, and then he said to the security guard, "We're not unauthorized personnel. This brother is a Grade 4 Talisman Formation Master, and he's come to participate in the Talisman Formation Master test." When he heard Wang Fei, the security guard glanced at Qin Chuan, and then he said with a rather respectful tone, "Talisman Formation Master, please display your certificate of qualifications." Qin Chuan rubbed his nose when he heard this, and then he said with slight embarrassment, I don't have a certificate." The security guard couldn't help but be slightly stunned when he heard Qin Chuan's reply. A Grade 4 Talisman Formation Master without a certificate? Wang Fei was slightly stunned as well, and he couldn't help but ask Qin Chuan, Could it be that you've never participated in the Talisman Formation Master's qualification test? Qin Chuan nodded and replied, I've indeed never participated in the Talisman Formation Master's qualification test. I'm from a very distant countryside, but we can start the test from Grade 1 Talisman Formation Master. Wang Fei couldn't help but have a toothache when he heard Qin Chuan, and he couldn't help but say to Qin Chuan, I knew you weren't reliable. As he spoke, Wang Fei was about to drag Qin Chuan away, and Qin Chuan asked curiously when he saw this, Could it be that I can't start the test from Grade 1 Talisman Formation Master? Or do you have other requirements? Wang Fei turned around to glance at Qin Chuan with slight helplessness and said, The Sane States Talisman Formation Master Association only accepts the test from Grade 4 and above. If you want to start the test from the lowest grade, then you have to go to a small place below. The test isn't accepted here, so you should obediently go back and sweep the streets. When he heard Wang Fei's explanation, Qin Chuan couldn't help but reveal a wisp of astonishment. He truly never imagined that the Talisman Formation Master Association actually had such a rule. Chapter 833. It was absolutely impossible for Qin Chuan to obediently return to sweep the floor. He struggled free of Wang Fei's hand before turning around to ask the security guard at the entrance of the Talisman Formation Master Association, How can I obtain a chance to take the test under the circumstances that I don't have a certificate? The security guard replied when he heard Qin Chuan's question, Rules are rules. It's impossible to give you this chance no matter what. When Wang Fei saw Qin Chuan still intended to say something, he hurriedly moved forward to stop Qin Chuan. And then he said to Qin Chuan, Kid, shut up. This branch office of the Talisman Formation Master Association is the most formidable power in the bottom layer. If you offend them, then you won't even have the chance to sweep the floor. Qin Chuan was slightly unwilling when he heard this. But I'm really a Grade 4 Talisman Formation Master. Who's making a racket outside? Right at this moment, a delicate figure walked out from the office, and the expressions of the two security guards instantly became slightly panicked when they saw this figure appear. Young Miss Swa, it isn't us who's making a racket. It's them who want to forcefully enter the office. What? Someone dares to forcefully enter our Talisman Formation Master Association's office? Who's so audacious? Zhuo Lingling moved forward and placed her hands on her hips as she questioned Qin Chuan. Did you eat a bear's heart or a leopard's gall? Wang Fei hurriedly moved forward when he saw this and said to Zhuo Lingling with a flattering expression, Young Miss Zhuo, calm your anger. This is all a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. Right at this moment, Qin Chuan took a step forward instead and said to Zhuo Lingling, I do indeed want to enter the office, but I'm not forcefully entering, and I want to enter with the identity of a Talisman Formation Master. Zhuo Lingling was slightly bewildered when she heard this. Since you're a Talisman Formation Master, then why did the security guard say you wanted to forcefully enter? Young Miss Zhuo, you can't blame us. He says he's a Talisman Formation Master, yet he doesn't have a certificate. Moreover, he's completely ignorant of the rules of our Talisman Formation Master Association. How could we dare allow him to enter? The security guard had an aggrieved expression. We're only doing our duty. When she heard the security guard's explanation, the gaze Zhuo Lingling shot at Qin Chuan instantly became slightly strange, and she asked, You don't have a Talisman Formation Master's qualification certificate? Qin Chuan nodded frankly. I indeed don't have the qualifications to be a Talisman Formation Master, but I'm a genuine 4th grade Talisman Formation Master. Grade 4 Talisman Formation Master. Zhuo Lingling glanced at Qin Chuan with slight surprise, and then she asked curiously, You've never participated in the Talisman Formation Master Association's test, so how do you know you're a Grade 4 Talisman Formation Master? Isn't this contradictory? Qin Chuan didn't say anything. Instead, he directly inscribed an omnidirectional thunder prison in front of Zhuo Lingling. He then pushed the array diagram in his hand towards Zhuo Lingling. This is a Level 3 Talisman Array. Can this prove my identity as a Talisman Array Master? Qin Chuan's sudden action of inscribing a Talisman Array instantly stunned the 4 people present. Wang Fei was even extremely excited as he said to Qin Chuan, "You're actually able to directly inscribe a talisman array with your spiritual energy without relying on a talisman brush?" Qin Chuan was slightly curious when he saw Wang Fei's reaction. Could it be that this isn't the basic operation of a talisman formation master? Hiss! Wang Fei couldn't help but gasp. When did using spiritual energy to directly inscribe a talisman formation master's basic operation? Has he already fallen behind the times? This talisman array has indeed attained the might of a level 3 talisman array. Moreover, it's a comparatively rare battle array. At this moment, Zhuo Lingling's gaze at Qin Chuan had become serious as well. "You said earlier that you're a grade 4 talisman formation master. Could it be that you're able to directly inscribe a level 4 talisman array with your spiritual energy?" Qin Chuan shook his head and replied, "I can't do it for now. A level 4 talisman array was more than 10 times more complicated than a level 3 one. Even with Qin Chuan's powerful spiritual energy, he still had to rely on a talisman brush to inscribe one." Upon hearing Qin Chuan's reply, Zhuo Lingling let out a long sigh of relief. If Qin Chuan could directly inscribe a level 4 talisman array with his spiritual energy, it would be too terrifying. After all, there are definitely no more than 100 level 4 talisman formation masters in the entire Sane State who could do this, and there were more than 10 million of them in the Sane State. You're indeed at the level of a level 3 talisman formation master, but we'll have to go through an assessment to know your exact level. Come in with me. Zhuo Lingling turned to the security guard beside her and said to them, "I've brought him in. If there's any problem, I'll naturally take responsibility." Hearing Zhuo Lingling's words, the security guard naturally had no objection. He happily let Qin Chuan in, and Wang Fei was allowed to enter the office as well. The office looked ordinary from the outside, but the inside was an eye-opener for Qin Chuan. There were all kinds of strange talisman arrays on both sides of the transparent crystal corridor, which emitted soft or dazzling lights. They operated slowly, making it hard for people to move their eyes away from them after a single glance. The talisman array you're looking at is the center of our office's defense, the astronomical formation, Zhuo Lingling said to Qin Chuan. The astronomical formation is a level 5 defensive talisman array developed by an astronomical formation master. Even a cultivator in the peak of the apotheosis realm would find it extremely difficult to break the astronomical formation. Even a powerful figure in the Dongshu realm would be able to block a strike from it. However, a powerful figure in the Dongshu realm would probably look down on a small place like our office. Hearing Zhuo Lingling's words, Qin Chuan's face couldn't help but reveal a hint of excitement. So there's still the Dongshu realm above the apotheosis realm. Seeing the excited expression on Qin Chuan's face, Zhuo Lingling smiled faintly and asked, "Where did you sneak in from?" Hearing Zhuo Lingling's question, Qin Chuan came back to his senses and said to Zhuo Lingling, "I don't know the name of the place I came from. I only know that it's a rather backward place. There are many things that I've never heard of or seen before." Zhuo Lingling didn't mind Qin Chuan's vague explanation. She chuckled and said, "It seems like you came from some backward planet. However, it's quite surprising that a talisman array genius like you could appear in that kind of place." Hearing this, Qin Chuan pursed his lips and didn't say anything else. On the other hand, Wang Fei, who was walking by Qin Chuan's side, opened his mouth instead, and he had an excited expression as he said to Qin Chuan, "This is the first time I've entered the Talisman Formation Master Association's office. It's truly too magnificent. A grade 5 talisman formation isn't something that anyone can easily set up." Hearing Wang Fei's words, Qin Chuan nodded lightly. "It's indeed shocking. Brother, you have such outstanding talent. In the future, you'll definitely be able to shine in the field of talisman arrays. When that time comes, don't forget about me." Wang Fei chuckled at Qin Chuan. "We can be considered friends in adversity. When the time comes, you'll have to help me." Hearing Wang Fei's words, Qin Chuan's expression couldn't help but become a little strange. He looked at Wang Fei and said, "You told me before that I shouldn't call you brother. I should call you Brother Fei." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Wang Fei's expression immediately became very interesting. He pretended to be confused and said, "Did I say something like that? You must have misheard, right? That must be it." Chapter 834. Under Zhuo Lingling's lead, the three of them arrived in front of a huge crystal door. After Zhuo Lingling used the ring on her finger to scan the crystal door scanner, the crystal door slowly opened. A huge blue palace appeared before Qinchuan's group. Looking at the magnificent palace before them, Qinchuan couldn't help but be dumbfounded. This was actually an ice palace. Seeing Qinchuan and Wang Fei's shocked expressions, Zhuo Lingling smiled proudly and said to the two of them, "This is the location of our Sid City's Talisman Array Master Association, the Mystic Ice Palace." Hearing Zhuo Lingling's words, Wang Fei's eyes immediately widened. He cried out in surprise. Could this be the legendary Celestial Ice Master's sacred artifact, the Mystic Ice Palace? Zhuo Lingling nodded and replied, "Little fatty, you're quite knowledgeable. This is indeed the Mystic Ice Palace, but it's just a replica. It's only at the level of a top-grade Dao artifact." Hearing this, Wang Fei couldn't help but sigh. Even if it's just a replica, it's still amazing enough. Qinchuan's head was filled with question marks as he listened to the conversation between Zhuo Lingling and Wang Fei. He knew nothing about the Celestial Ice Master, the Mystic Ice Palace, and sacred artifacts. He practically couldn't understand what Zhuo Lingling and Wang Fei were talking about. Qinchuan's embarrassed expression was quickly discovered by Zhuo Lingling. She smiled at Qinchuan and said, "It's fine if you don't understand now. Later, once you pass the exam and become a 4th-grade Talisman Array Master, you'll naturally have the qualifications to enter our Talisman Array Master Association's library to read. At that time, you'll have a whole new understanding of this world." Wang Fei added, "Moreover, once you become a 4th-grade Talisman Array Master, you'll immediately obtain permanent residency in the same state and become one of its citizens." Hearing this, Qinchuan asked curiously, "What if I don't pass the 4th-grade Talisman Array Master exam?" Hearing this, Zhuo Lingling gave Qinchuan a deep look and replied, "Then you'll die." The location of the Talisman Formation Masters Association's test was in the side hall of Dark Ice Hall, and Qinchuan was surprised by the fact that it wasn't a person that tested him, but a square machine. Zhuo Lingling pointed at the silver-white machine before her and said to Qinchuan, "This is the testing machine of our Talisman Formation Master Association. It will test the strength of your talisman formations to judge the talisman formations you've inscribed." As she spoke, Zhuo Lingling took a step back and said to Qinchuan, "You can start your performance now." Qinchuan nodded and took out his talisman brush from his storage ring. Just as he was about to inscribe the talisman array, Zhuo Lingling suddenly called out to him, "Wait a moment, is this your talisman brush?" Zhuo Lingling looked at the talisman pen in Qinchuan's hand with a puzzled look. She seemed to be very surprised. Qinchuan was puzzled and asked, "Yes, is there a problem?" Zhuo Lingling looked at Qinchuan with an astounded gaze and asked, "You used this thing to inscribe a grade 4 talisman array?" Qinchuan nodded, and then he lowered his head to look at the talisman brush in his hand. Could it be that there's something wrong with this talisman brush? Zhuo Lingling shook her head helplessly as she looked at Qinchuan's confused expression, and then she withdrew a talisman brush and passed it to Qinchuan. She said, "This is the standard talisman brush of our Talisman Formation Master Association. Use it." Qinchuan looked at the talisman brush that flowed with multicolored lights and was like a swimming dragon that Zhuo Lingling passed over, and then he lowered his head to look at the ordinary talisman brush in his hand. He couldn't help but reveal a wisp of embarrassment because the talisman brush in his hand was simply trash when compared to the talisman brush in Zhuo Lingling's hand. "Thank you." Qinchuan didn't hold back and directly stretched out his hand to receive the talisman brush. As soon as he touched it, he felt that the texture of the talisman brush was extremely fine, and it felt extremely comfortable in his hand. "You can begin." Zhuo Lingling indicated that Qinchuan could start inscribing the talisman formation now. Qinchuan held the talisman brush tightly and made a simple attempt before he started inscribing the talisman formation. His spiritual energy flowed through the talisman brush in an extremely smooth manner to form numerous talisman characters in the air, and they arranged themselves to form a precise talisman formation. Buzz. The machine in front of Qin Chuan suddenly emitted a low, buzzing sound, and then it mechanically reported, detecting the current talisman formation. Strength of the 4th rank, elementary. When he heard the machine's report, Qin Chuan turned his head to look at Zhuo Lingling and asked, "Does this count as passing the test?" Zhuo Lingling shook her head when she heard this, and then she said to Qin Chuan, "This only proves that you've grasped a single 4th rank talisman formation. If you want to pass the test to become a 4th rank talisman formation master, you need to grasp at least 3 types of 4th rank talisman formations." Every place had its own rules. In a land of exile, one only needed to grasp a single 4th rank talisman formation master to be considered a 4th rank talisman formation master. In the sane state, however, one needed to grasp at least 3 types of 4th rank talisman formations to be considered a 4th rank talisman formation master. Qin Chuan was not surprised by this. As he spoke, Qin Chuan turned his head to disperse the previous talisman formation and continued inscribing the next one. When his talisman formation was completed, the machine tested it again. The strength of the talisman formation was still at the 4th rank. However, when Qin Chuan inscribed the 3rd talisman formation, the machine's test result indicated that the 3rd talisman formation was only at the 3rd rank. Detecting the current talisman formation, strength of the 3rd rank, advanced. Qin Chuan's expression didn't change when he heard the machine's report. This was because he was testing his self-created minor immortal imprisoning talisman array. He had expected that it wouldn't reach the strength of a 4th-level talisman array. After dispersing the minor immortal trap talisman formation, Qin Chuan did not continue inscribing talisman formations. Seeing this, Zhuo Lingling frowned and asked, "Is it over?" Although Qin Chuan had already grasped 2 4th-rank talisman formations and was already very outstanding, rules were rules. As long as Qin Chuan could not inscribe the 3rd 4th-rank talisman formation master, Qin Chuan would not be able to pass the test to become a 4th-rank talisman formation master. Not yet. Qin Chuan shook his head and then began inscribing talisman formations. From Qin Chuan's movements, it could be seen that he was much more careful than before. It seemed that he was trying something. Seeing Qin Chuan's movements, Zhuo Lingling could not help but frown slightly and whisper, "Is he creating his own talisman formation? Is he trying to create a 4th-rank talisman formation on the spot? How is this possible?" When she saw Qin Chuan inscribing the 1st talisman formation, Zhuo Lingling didn't think much of it. However, when Qin Chuan inscribed the 2nd and 3rd talisman formations, her expression changed. What Qin Chuan was inscribing wasn't the self-created talisman formation that she had imagined, but a combination of talisman formations. Just when this thought emerged in Zhuo Lingling's heart, the combination of talisman formations in front of Qin Chuan suddenly collapsed. Zhuo Lingling was about to speak when she saw this scene, but Qin Chuan had already started a new attempt. Once, twice, thrice, as the number of attempts increased, the combination of talisman formations under Qin Chuan's pen became more and more stable and gradually took shape. Seeing this scene, Zhuo Lingling couldn't help but open her mouth wide and reveal a shocked expression. Wham! Right at this moment, the testing machine suddenly buzzed. Detecting current talisman formation. Strength of 4th rank, advanced. Chapter 835. Zhuo Lingling's eyes widened as she stared at the results displayed on the machine in disbelief. She suspected that there was something wrong with her eyes and that the machine had malfunctioned. However, in the end, her suspicions turned into deep shock. Level 4 Advanced Hiss. Wang Fei was dumbfounded. He gasped and exclaimed, "Terrifying. Brother, you're too awesome." Wang Fei gave Qin Chuan a thumbs up. In the sane state, Every Talisman Formation Master who can inscribe a Level 4 Advanced Talisman Formation Master is an honored guest of the various forces. Brother, you're too awesome. Wang Fei had never imagined that he would meet such a big treasure like Qin Chuan when he came to take over the shift today. It was simply a pleasant surprise. Upon hearing Wang Fei's words, Qin Chuan asked doubtfully, "Am I really that awesome?" Less than an hour ago, he had almost been a street sweeper. It would have taken him 10,000 days to earn 100 work points and become an official resident of the sane state. Now, he had become an honored guest of the various forces that Wang Fei had mentioned. This change was too big and too fast. What he said is indeed true. At this moment, Zuolingling had also recovered from her shock. She looked at Qin Chuan with an extremely complicated gaze, still finding it difficult to accept the reality before her eyes. There are many Level 4 Talisman Formation Masters in the sane state, at least 10,000 of them. However, most of these Level 4 Talisman Formation Masters can only inscribe Level 4 Elementary Talisman Formations. Even inscribing Level 4 Intermediate Talisman Formations is a problem for them. For such people, Level 4 Talisman Formation Masters are their ceiling. There is almost no hope for them to advance any further. Some genius Talisman Formation Masters can inscribe Level 4 Advanced Talisman Formations. Only such Talisman Formation Masters have the qualifications to advance to Level 5 Talisman Formation Masters. You are such a genius. Zuolingling took a deep breath and said to Qin Chuan, "With your talent, you will become the treasurer of the Talisman Formation Master Association no matter which galaxy you are in. You don't seem to be over 100 years old, right?" Upon hearing this, Qin Chuan scratched his head and replied, "Actually, I'm only 27 years old this year. It's a nominal age." Silence, a deathly silence. Zuolingling and Wang Fei both looked at Qin Chuan with extremely strange gazes, as if they were looking at an enormous monster. A 27-year-old mid-nascent soul stage cultivator and a 27-year-old high-grade talisman array master. If this wasn't a monster, then what was? I need to calm down. Zuolingling face-bombed and couldn't help but ask Qin Chuan, "Are you really only 27 years old?" Qin Chuan nodded and replied affirmatively, "I'm really only 27 years old." Wang Fei looked at Qin Chuan's calm expression and couldn't help but recall himself when he was 27 years old. At that time, he was just a small cultivator in the foundation establishment stage. Was he still dreaming of advancing to the golden core stage before the age of 50? You really can't compare yourself to others. Comparing yourself to others will only anger you to death. Come with me. Zuolingling suddenly grabbed Qin Chuan's wrist and walked out quickly. Qin Chuan didn't know what was going on and could only let Zuolingling lead him forward. Bang! Zuolingling pushed open a huge crystal door and walked into a meeting hall. At this moment, the table in the meeting hall was filled with people. Everyone looked at Zuolingling, who had suddenly barged in with an extremely shocked expression, as if they couldn't understand what was going on with Zuolingling. "Lingling, this is the meeting hall. It's not a place you can just barge in." A beautiful woman in a long black dress sat at the head of the table and looked at Zuolingling with a slight frown. Then, she looked at Qin Chuan behind Zuolingling and said in a deep voice, "Especially when you're bringing an outsider with you." Zuolingling didn't care about that. She slammed her hand on the table and pressed Qin Chuan's hand on it. She turned to the woman in the black dress sitting at the head of the table and said, "Sister, our guild is saved. It's him. He can save our guild." Hearing Zuolingling's words, the woman in the black dress frowned and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Who is he?" Zuolingling was about to speak when a handsome young man sitting next to the woman in the black dress suddenly stood up and said to Zuolingling with a smile, "Zuolingling, have you been scared out of your wits by those fellows in Tyrannical Heaven City? Who is that kid next to you? What makes him think he can save our guild?" Hearing this, Zuolingling sneered and said to the handsome young man, "Andre, don't tell me you think you're the youngest and most outstanding talisman array master in Caesar City." While speaking, Zuolingling pushed Qin Chuan to the front and pointed at Qin Chuan and said to the crowd, "He's an advanced 4th-rank talisman array master. Hearing Zhuo words, the crowd subconsciously looked at Qin. They were all somewhat surprised. They didn't expect that Zhuo would be able to find an advanced 4th-rank talisman array master at this time. So what? Andre laughed. I'm only 87 years old. What about him? You should know that once you're over 100 years old, you're not qualified to participate in this meeting. Do you understand? Hearing Andre's words, Zhuo sneered again. Is an 87-year-old advanced 4th-rank talisman array master that amazing? The one next to me is only 27 years old. Hiss. Hearing Zhuo words, the crowd was shocked. The way they looked at Qin suddenly changed. The confident and proud smile on Andre's face suddenly froze. The woman in black excitedly stood up and quickly walked towards Qin, grabbing Qin's hand. After feeling Qin's hand, the woman in black was pleasantly surprised. His bone age is really only 27 years old, maybe even a little younger. After hearing the woman in black's words, the people sitting at the conference table couldn't remain calm anymore. They all stood up and started to feel Qin's bones. The group of people surrounded Qin, almost touching Qin from head to toe. The facts proved that Qin was indeed a 27-year-old young man. Can you guys not do this? It makes me look very silly. Qin looked at the group of middle-aged and old people who were carelessly touching his body in horror. He was a pure and innocent little boy. He would be ruined by their touch. Hearing Qin's words, the crowd realized that they had lost their composure. They all took 2 steps back in embarrassment and coughed twice to cover up their embarrassment. The woman in black didn't care about this. She directly pulled Qin's hand and walked out of the conference room. Let's go to the examination room. Although his bone age was really only 27 years old, whether Qin was really a 4th-rank advanced talisman array master or not, they still had to see it with their own eyes. The group of people followed behind the woman in black towards the examination room. In a large conference room, only Andre stood there alone. His face was ashen and his eyes were burning with rage. Damn it! How could a 27-year-old 4th-rank advanced talisman array master suddenly appear in Caesar City? I don't believe it. This must be fake. Chapter 836. Just 5 minutes ago, Qin had been led out of the examination room by Zhuo. Less than 5 minutes later, he was signed back in, and this time, the examination room was filled to the brim with people. Wang Fei stared dumbfoundedly at the group of important figures of the Talisman Array Master Association following behind Qin. He couldn't help but shudder. What was going on? More than half of the important figures of Caesar City were here. The black-dressed woman frowned as she looked around the examination room, then said to Zhuo, the examination room should be expanded. Zhuo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Normally, in order to not disturb the Talisman Array Masters who were examining the strength of the Talisman Arrays, only 2 or 3 people would enter the examination room. This room was already spacious enough, but this time, nearly 30 people had entered at once. Naturally, the examination room seemed a bit cramped. Begin the examination. A high-grade talisman array of the 4th rank. The black-dressed woman gave Qin a deep look. I hope you won't make me happy for nothing. Although Qin didn't know what was going on with the convention these people were talking about, nor did he know why they cared so much about it. Right now, if he didn't do the examination again, he would probably be torn to pieces by these people. After thinking it over, in order to preserve his little life, Qin decided to do the examination again. Standing in front of the examination machine, Qin once again inscribed the talisman array according to his previous thoughts and feelings. When they saw Qin's pen gradually form the talisman array combination, the examination room once again rang out with gasps of surprise. It's actually not a simple talisman array, but a talisman array combination. This is much harder than mastering a high-grade talisman array of the 4th rank. Could it be that our Caesar City is really going to have a genius in mining? But why haven't we noticed it before? Don't talk. Don't disturb him. After the black-dressed woman spoke, everyone quieted down. They looked at Qin Xuan, inscribing talisman array combinations with admiring gazes. When Qin Xuan finished the last stroke, everyone couldn't help but feel nervous again. Buzz, accompanied by the buzzing sound of the examination machine. The results of the examination appeared before everyone's eyes. Detecting the current array glyphs. Strength level 4 advanced. In fact, there was no need for a machine to test it. Just by feeling the terrifying power contained in the rune array combination, everyone could guess that the strength of the rune array combination must have reached level 4. However, guessing was one thing, and seeing it with their own eyes was another. It's really level 4 advanced. A 27-year-old advanced level 4 talisman formation master. The woman in the black dress stared at the report for a while with sparkling eyes. Then, she looked at Qin Xuan and asked, "What's your name?" Qin Xuan dispersed the array glyphs and looked back at the woman in black dress. He replied, "My name is Qin Xuan." The woman in black said to Qin Xuan, "I am Zwisisi, the acting president of the Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association. As the acting president, I would like to invite you to join the Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association. Are you willing?" Qin Xuan gently nodded when he heard this. Just as he was about to agree, an untimely voice suddenly rang out. "He's not qualified to join our Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association." Andre walked through the crowd with a gloomy face and arrived in front of Zwisisi. His gaze towards Qin Xuan was filled with disdain. Zwisisi frowned and said, "Andre, on what basis do you say that?" Andre sneered and said, "On the basis that this guy is a stowaway. He doesn't have the status of an official citizen of the sane state." Everyone was shocked by Andre's words, and their gazes towards Qin Xuan became subtle. "So what?" Zwilingling snorted coldly. "Our Heath City has its own rules. Anyone with outstanding talent can become an official citizen of Heath City. Qin Xuan is a level 4 advanced talisman array master. Isn't that outstanding enough?" Andre cast a sidelong glance at Zwilingling, then turned his gaze towards Qin Xuan and said indifferently, "Zwilingling, don't forget that stowaways need a year of observation before they can become official citizens of Heath City. He has only been in Heath City for less than a day, right? There are less than 3 months before the start of the convention. His observation period hasn't passed yet." Everyone frowned when they heard Andre's words. According to Andre, even if Qin Xuan became a member of their Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association, he wouldn't be able to represent their Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association in the convention 3 months later. In other words, they had been happy for nothing. Zwisisi took a deep look at Andre and said, "I know that Heath City has this rule, but in the past, whenever a genius appears among the stowaways in Heath City, there would always be people who would use the excuse that geniuses should be given special treatment to skip the 1-year observation period. I think there shouldn't be anyone who would disagree with us skipping this rule, right?" Hearing Zwisisi's words, Andre's face gradually turned gloomy. He looked at Zwisisi and said, "Sisi, you have to consider this carefully. Rules are rules. Even if you're the acting president of the Talisman Array Master Association, you are still a member of Heath City. If you don't abide by the rules, I'm afraid it won't be good for your reputation if word gets out. Andre, just give up on that idea." Zwilingling was furious. "Even if Qin Xuan can't join our association and represent our association in the convention, don't even think about your treacherous scheme succeeding. Even if my sister loses her position as acting president, she won't marry you." Hearing Zwilingling's furious roar, Andre's face turned completely gloomy. He glared at Zwilingling with an extremely furious gaze. Some soybean-sized granules actually began to slowly grow on his handsome face, making him look extremely ferocious. "What did you just say?" "Andre, you can be content with being an inferior human for the rest of your life." Roar. Andre was completely enraged when he heard this. He roared furiously at Zwilingling and was about to charge at her, but he was stopped by Zwisisi. "Andre, what are you trying to do?" Zwisisi stared sternly at Andre and said in a deep voice, "Are you trying to trigger the astronomical formation?" Hearing Zwisisi mention the astronomical formation, the furious Andre finally calmed down. The small granules on his body disappeared, and everything returned to normal. Andre was still the handsome and confident Andre, but the gazes everyone looked at him with had become exceptionally strange. Especially Qin. He was completely stunned, not only because of Andre's formidable strength, but also because Andre had actually transformed into an appearance that was neither human nor ghost. Moreover, what did inferior human mean? Chapter 837. You'll all regret this. Andre spat out these harsh words and left angrily. When the others saw this scene, their expressions changed slightly. No one knew what they were thinking. Everyone dispersed. Zwisisi's face was cold. Clearly, she was not in a good mood. Seeing this, the crowd could only disperse. After a short while, only Qin, Wang Fei, and Zhua's sisters were left in the examination room. Elder sister, I'm sorry. I was too impulsive just now. Zhuo Lingling looked at Zwisisi with guilt. I shouldn't have provoked Andre like that. Zwisisi looked at Zhuo Lingling helplessly and said, It's not like you don't know that Andre has always been very concerned about the origin of the inferior human race. It's a taboo for him. Bringing it up in public will make him very embarrassed. Hearing Zwisisi's words, Zhuo Lingling's face couldn't help but reveal a wronged expression. She was so anxious just now because of the guild and Zwisisi. Seeing Zhuo Lingling's wronged expression, Zwisisi sighed and said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said such harsh words to you. It's not elder sister's fault. I'm useless. If my talent was just a bit better, we wouldn't have to look at Andre's face. Zhuo Lingling shook her head. But if Qin can't participate in the assembly, are we really going to rely on Andre? Zwisisi's face darkened when she heard this. She said in a low voice, Do you want the guild that father worked so hard to establish to collapse in my hands? Qin stood to the side and listened to the conversation between Zwisisi and Zhuo Lingling. He couldn't help but raise his hand and ask, I have a question. Hearing Qin's words, Zwisisi turned her gaze to Qin and asked, What question do you have? Qin glanced at Zhuo Lingling, then said to Zwisisi, Previously, she told me that as long as I passed the 4th rank array master examination, I would be able to become an official citizen of Heath City. Now that Andre has interfered, does that mean I have no chance? Qin felt aggrieved at the mention of this matter. It wasn't easy for him to find an opportunity to become an official citizen and walk around Heath City openly. But in the end, it was all ruined by Andre. It was simply too infuriating. Hearing Qin's question, Zwisisi said helplessly, If it was in the past, you could naturally become an official citizen of Heath City. But now, I'm afraid it's very difficult. Zwisisi then looked at Zhuo Lingling and said with a bitter smile, If you didn't rush into the meeting room with him and instead told me about it first and confirmed his official citizenship, the situation now would be very different. Hearing Zwisisi's words, Zhuo Lingling's face couldn't help but reveal a trace of regret. Why didn't she think of this at that time? Well, I wonder if there's any way to speed up the inspection period? Qin was somewhat puzzled. Do I have to wait for a year? If it was under normal circumstances, Qin wouldn't think that waiting for a year would be a problem. But now it was different. Although he hadn't spoken a word to Andre, because of his Zhua's sister's actions, he had completely offended Andre. Andre would definitely try his best to cause trouble for him or even eliminate him. If he couldn't get an official citizen status as soon as possible and find a chance to leave Heath City, he might fall into Andre's evil hands. Judging from Andre's aura when he was angry just now, he definitely wasn't Andre's match. As if seeing through Qin's thoughts, Zwisisi asked Qin, Are you worried that Andre will cause trouble for you? Qin smiled bitterly and said, Shouldn't I be worried? I'm just a small mid-yuanying stage cultivator. Speaking of his cultivation level, Qin felt a little depressed. As the world's strongest cultivator, he had fallen into a situation where he couldn't beat anyone. It was really too sad. Zhuo Lingling looked at Qin apologetically and said, I'm sorry. You're being targeted by Andre because of me. It's useless to say this now. Qingchuan looked at Zwilingling. We need to think about how to break out of this situation. You're right. We need to think of a way to solve the current situation. Zhuo looked at Qingchuan and said, You just said that the inspection period will end early, but it reminded me of a possibility. As long as you can make a great enough contribution to Heath City, you can become an honorary citizen of Heath City. This way, your citizenship will naturally be resolved. Qingchuan heard this and asked curiously, Then how can I make a great contribution? Zhuo looked deeply at Qingchuan and said, For example, to become a 5th grade talisman formation master. Hearing Zhuo answer, Qingchuan was stunned for a moment and then replied, Just pretend I didn't ask. Become a 5th grade talisman formation master? You really have the guts to say that. Those who don't know would think that becoming a 5th grade talisman formation master is as easy as eating. Seeing the change in Qingchuan's expression, Zhuo knew that the condition she mentioned was extremely difficult for anyone. No matter how outstanding Qingchuan's talent was, it would be very difficult for him to become a 5th grade talisman formation master in a short period of time. Actually, there's another way. Zhuo looked at Qingchuan with a subtle gaze and asked, You're also a humanoid, right? Hearing Zhuo words, Qingchuan was stunned for a moment and then replied, Probably. To be honest, Qingchuan didn't know the difference between humanoids and humans, but since they were both humanoids, he might as well be one. Zhuo looked at Qingchuan with a complicated gaze and said, If you're also a humanoid, then as long as you find a citizen in Heath City who is willing to marry you, you could become a permanent resident of Heath City. Although you won't be an official citizen, you can at least represent our guild in the Talisman Formation Master Exchange. Qingchuan looked at Zhuo in astonishment and couldn't help but ask, What kind of idea is this? I've only been in Heath City for less than a day. Where am I going to find a citizen to marry? Even if I'm willing, they might not be willing. Hearing Qingchuan's words, Zhuo was silent for a moment and then replied, I'm willing. You're willing. Qingchuan suddenly stopped and looked at Zhuo with uncertainty and asked, You mean the two of us can get married? Yes. Since the words had already been spoken, Zhuo didn't have any more misgivings. She simply said to Qingchuan, If the two of us get married, you can become a permanent resident. This way, as long as you don't have any problems within half a year, you can become an official citizen. And as long as you're a permanent resident, you can represent our guild in the Talisman Formation Master Exchange. This is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But there's one thing, our marriage is just a fake. Chapter 838. Upon hearing Zhuo words, Qingchuan and Zwilingling were both stupefied. The two of them stared at Zhuo in disbelief. They really didn't expect that Zhuo would actually come up with such a rotten idea, like a fake marriage, in order to get Qingchuan to participate in the Talisman Formation Master Exchange. Faced with Qingchuan and Zhuolingling's disbelieving gazes, Zhuo also realized that the words she had said earlier were somewhat inappropriate. She turned around and walked outside, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. My goodness, brother, you're definitely the most awesome stowaway I've ever seen. The dignified president of Caesar City's Talisman Formation Master Association actually took the initiative to marry you and become your wife. Wang Fei gave Qingchuan a thumbs up and sighed with emotion. Brother, you're awesome. I admire you. Qingchuan rolled his eyes and couldn't be bothered to pay attention to Wang Fei. He turned to look at Zwilingling and asked, Can I go to your guild's library to read now? Also, I have some questions I want to ask you. Upon hearing Qingchuan's words, Zwilingling came back to her senses. She let out a long sigh of relief and said to Qingchuan, I'll take you to the library. If you have any questions, you can ask me on the way. As she spoke, Zwilingling turned to look at Wang Fei and warned him, As for you, I'll arrange for someone to escort you out of the guild. You're not allowed to speak of anything you've seen or heard today. If you dare to speak, you're dead. Upon hearing this, Wang Fei hurriedly raised his hand to cover his mouth and nodded vigorously. What a joke. Today's matter concerned so many important figures. If he dared to speak carelessly, then he would truly be tired of living. After dealing with Wang Fei's matter, Zhuo led Qin Xuan to the library. On the way to the library, Zhuo sighed and said to Qin Xuan, "You want to ask why my sister and I are so insistent on inviting you to represent our guild in the Talisman Formation Master Exchange, right?" Qin Xuan nodded and said to Zhuo, "This is indeed a question I want to ask." Hearing this, Zhuo face gradually revealed a trace of grief. She explained to Qin Xuan in a soft voice, "This Talisman Array Master Association in Heath City was founded by me and my elder sister's father. My father was a great and outstanding Talisman Array Master. Before he was 100 years old, he was already a 5th-rank Talisman Array Master, the best in the Sane State. Under my father's leadership, the Talisman Array Master Association in Heath City gradually grew stronger and gradually became one of the top 10 Talisman Array Master Associations in the Sane State. However, the good times didn't last long. Due to an accident, my father went missing. After searching for him for a long time, we couldn't find him." At this point, Zhuo sighed and continued, "Without my father's support, the Talisman Array Master Association in Heath City was greatly affected. Geniuses were constantly lost, and the experts of the older generation were poached by other guilds. The entire Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association quickly became a leaky sieve. The loss of geniuses and experts of the older generation caused our Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association to lose its position as one of the top 10 Talisman Array Master Associations. My elder sister and I participated in 2 consecutive Talisman Formation Master Exchange, but we were never able to get into the top 10. If our Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association fails to enter the top 10 again this time, we will be stripped of our title as one of the top 10 Talisman Array Master Associations and become mediocre. Because of this, my elder sister had no choice but to find our Heath City's Talisman Array Master Andre. She wanted to ask Andre to help us through this difficult time. However, Andre made an excessive request to my elder sister. If you hadn't appeared, my elder sister might have had no choice but to agree to Andre's request in order to keep her title as one of the top 10 Talisman Array Masters. It was also because I was worried that my elder sister would agree to Andre's request that I brought you and barged into the meeting room." After hearing Zhuo explanation, Qin Xuan asked with some doubt, "Is the title of one of the top 10 Talisman Array Masters that important?" Zhuo glanced at Qin Xuan and replied, "There are over 1,000 large cities in the Sane State, and each city has its own Talisman Array Master Association. The resources of the Talisman Array Master Association are limited in the Sane State, so it's impossible to treat every Talisman Array Master Association fairly. That's why there is a competition between the top 10 Talisman Array Masters and the top 100 Talisman Array Masters. The top 100 Talisman Array Master Association receives 30% of the resources each year, while the top 10 Talisman Array Master Association receives 50%. With the current strength of our Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association, it's extremely difficult to even enter the top 100 Talisman Array Master Association. If we fall out of the top 100 Talisman Array Master Association, the amount of resources our association receives each year will be pitifully small. At that time, the majority of our members will definitely choose to leave, and our association will completely collapse." Upon hearing this, Qin Xuan asked curiously, "When you and your elder sister participated in this competition, what were your rankings?" Zhuo couldn't help but blush slightly at the mention of this matter. She replied in a small voice, "My elder sister obtained 109th place, while I obtained 260th place." Upon hearing Zhuo reply, Qin Xuan pursed his lips and asked, "Why didn't you continue to participate?" Zhuo glanced at Qin Xuan and replied, "Only Talisman Array Masters under the age of 100 can participate in the Talisman Array Master Exchange. My elder sister and I are already over 100 years old." Qin Xuan looked somewhat astonished at Zhuo, who looked like a 16-year-old girl. It was really hard to imagine that Zhuo was already over 100 years old. When Zhuo Lingling saw the changes in Qin Shuan's expression, she knew what Qin Shuan was thinking in his heart. She glared at Qin Shuan with slight embarrassment and anger and said, "We're all cultivators. So long as we don't die, we can maintain our youth forever. Could it be that I can't look slightly younger?" "All right, I didn't say that you can't." Qin Shuan shrugged, and then he asked, "So both of you don't want the Talisman Array Master Association your father established to collapse at your hands. So you want to invite me to represent your association and participate in the Talisman Array Master Exchange this time, right?" Zhuo Lingling nodded and sighed once more. It would be fine if Andre didn't obstruct us. When he heard Zhuo Lingling mention Andre, Qin Shuan asked with slight curiosity, "You said earlier that Andre was a lowly humanoid. What did you mean by that?" Zhuo Lingling glanced at Qin Shuan with slight surprise, and then she asked, "Exactly which remote mountain did you come from? You actually don't even know this?" Qin Shuan laughed bitterly and said to Zhuo Lingling, "I'm an orphan. I had no parents since a young age, and I practically grew up by picking up trash. So I don't know the slightest thing about many things that seem like common sense to all of you." In this aspect, Qin Shuan didn't deceive Zhuo Lingling. He was indeed an orphan and had indeed grown up in a trash dump, so he really didn't know the slightest thing about these common sense things. If he knew all of this, then he wouldn't have asked this question. Chapter 839. Hearing Qin Shuan introduce himself, Zhuo Lingling couldn't help but stare at Qin Shuan with a strange look in her eyes. She said to Qin Shuan in a quiet voice, "So, you grew up in a junkyard and didn't undergo any systematic training or training. You suddenly rose up like a new force to be reckoned with, reaching the heights that we would need to reach when we're over 100 years old before the age of 30? Qin Shuan cracked a smile upon hearing this. "That sounds about right. It really is depressing." Zhuo Lingling sighed dejectedly. "If only I had such a terrifying talent like yours." Qin Shuan chuckled. "Let's talk about the humanoids instead." Qin Shuan already couldn't wait to learn more about the humanoids. However, Zhuo Lingling seemed to have lost all her energy. She had no interest in discussing anything else with Qin Shuan. She directly led Qin Shuan into the library. The library of the Heath City's Talisman Formation Masters Guild was much larger than Qin Shuan had imagined, and much more fantastical as well. Within an enormous, icy blue space, there were countless books floating in the air, emitting a soft light like stars. "This is a library?" Qin Shuan stared at the sky, filled with books in astonishment. This was the first time he had seen a library like this. It was completely beyond his imagination. Zhuo Lingling nodded, then said to Qin Shuan, "This is the library of our Heath City's Talisman Formation Masters Guild. Normally, this place is only open to Talisman Formation Masters of the 4th rank and above. For you to be able to come here is an exception." As she spoke, Zhuo Lingling handed a circular ring to Qin Shuan. She said to Qin Shuan, "This is a sensory device. Wear it on your head. If you want to read a book, just think about it in your mind, and the book will automatically appear before you." Qin Shuan was somewhat surprised upon hearing this. There's actually such a thing? Qin Shuan reached out to take the sensor and put it on his head. He tried to think of the word humanoid in his mind. As he thought of it, a thick book slowly appeared in front of him. Zhuo Lingling glanced at the cover of the book that Qin Shuan wanted to see, then said to Qin Shuan, "The things that you want to know are basically here. If you can't find them, then come find me. If there's nothing else, then I'll be leaving first." Qin Shuan turned to look at Zhuo Lingling and said gratefully, "Thank you." In the library, Qin Shuan slowly closed the book in his hand. Shock flashed in his eyes as he whispered, "So that's how it is." The so-called humanoid race was a race with a similar bloodline to the human race. The origin of these humanoid races was the offspring of the human race and other races. The humanoid race was also divided into 3 classes: upper, middle, and lower. The ones with the closest bloodline to the human race were the upper-class humanoids, the ones with a slightly more distant bloodline were the middle-class humanoids, and the ones with a slightly more distant bloodline were the lower-class humanoids. Generally speaking, the purer the bloodline of the humanoid race, the closer their talents in all aspects would be to the human race. However, the more distant their bloodline was, the further their talents would be from the human race. There would even be some special mutations, such as the sarcoma that grew on Andre's face when he was angry. The royal family of the Sane State was the upper-class humanoid race, and all the citizens of the Sane State were proud of their identity as humanoids. The reason for this was that the human race was one of the top 10 ancient races. It was a symbol of strength and nobility. Qin Chuan was greatly shocked when he read the contents of the book. He never thought that the human race that was almost wiped out by Zerg not long ago would be one of the top 10 ancient races in the universe. The top 10 ancient races are still active in the universe today. The Holy Race, the Void Walkers, the Nephilim, the Protoss, and the Tian people. The Holy Race should be Zerg. The Zerg we've come into contact with is probably just a drop in the ocean of the real Zerg. Qin Chuan searched for books about the human race and the demon race in the library. After reading some records in these books, Qin Chuan finally had a certain understanding of the past of the human race and the demon race. So the reason why our world is called the Land of Exile is because it's the place where the human race and the demon race were exiled. Why were the human race and the demon race exiled as one of the top 10 ancient races? After reading the records in these books, Qin Chuan had too many questions in his mind. However, when he tried to find the answers in the library, he found nothing. Qin Chuan closed the book in his hand, took a deep breath, and whispered, "I must not expose my identity as a human." After understanding these matters, Qin Chuan started to understand the Sane State and the Talisman Formation Master Exchange Conference. The Sane State was an enormous kingdom of the humanoid race. They occupied the entire Sane galaxy and were extremely powerful. It was a paradise for humanoids. So this is a kingdom of the humanoid race. No wonder everyone looks like a human. Fortunately, I came to this place. Qin Chuan was very glad that he hadn't entered another galaxy. Otherwise, he might not be alive now. The Talisman Formation Master Exchange Conference was a grand event that was held every 50 years in the Sane State. This grand event was a carnival for Talisman Formation Masters. When the time came, all Talisman Formation Masters will be able to display their abilities in the conference. The outstanding ones might even become honored guests of the Sane State's imperial family. During this competition, the Talisman Formation Master Associations of the various cities would send out the geniuses they fostered to participate in the ranking battle. The higher the ranking of the geniuses, the more resources the Talisman Formation Master Association would be able to obtain in the Tao of Talisman Formations for the next 50 years. This caused Qin Chuan to be unable to help but recall the ranking battles of the 6 great academies that he'd participated in. It was extremely similar to the Talisman Formation Master Exchange Conference. After understanding the Talisman Formation Master Exchange Conference, a new book appeared in Qin Chuan's hand. The words Steel Rose were written on the cover. Steel Rose, a military force formed purely from humanoid women. They serve the only Grand Duchess of the Sane State, Madame Angel. They are Madame Angel's personal guard. A wisp of a subtle expression couldn't help but flash through Qin Chuan's eyes as he read the introduction to the Steel Rose. He said in a low voice, "Looks like I found a pretty good backer for Lil Z and Bayou." Just as Qin Chuan was about to continue reading some books related to the Sane State, Zwilingling suddenly appeared in the library. She gazed at Qin Chuan and asked in a slightly anxious manner, "Have you considered the matter my elder sister told you about last time?" Qin Chuan couldn't help but be stunned when he heard this. "What matter are you talking about?" When she saw Qin Chuan's bewildered expression, Zwilingling couldn't help but speak in a slightly anxious manner. "The matter of the fake marriage. Andre has come looking for us again. You must help me and my elder sister overcome this crisis." Chapter 840. Qin Chuan looked at the anxious Zwilingling and was somewhat speechless. "Don't be so anxious. Can't you explain things slowly?" Zwilingling didn't care about this. She stepped forward and grabbed Qin Chuan's arm and walked out of the library. As she walked, she said to Qin Chuan, "That shameless bastard Andre is here again. This time, he's here to force a marriage. If my sister doesn't agree to marry him, not only will he not help us, but he will also take away a group of elders from the guild and hit us while we're down." Hearing Zhuo Lingling's words, Qin Chuan frowned and said, "But what does this have to do with me?" Zhuo Lingling looked back at Qin Chuan and said, "I'd rather let my sister marry you with an unknown background than let her marry that bastard Andre." Without waiting for Qin Chuan to refuse, Zhuo Lingling directly said to Qin Chuan, "Only permanent residents of Caesar City are protected by the laws of Caesar City. If you don't want to marry my sister, then you're a stowaway. Even if Andre kills you in front of everyone, no one will hold him responsible. Even if you don't marry my sister, Andre won't let you off because he will never allow you to take away his title as the youngest talisman array master in Caesar City. If you marry my sister, you may or may not die. But if you refuse this marriage, then you will definitely die. Unless you have the confidence to kill Andre, you have no reason to refuse." After hearing Zhuo Lingling's words, Qin Chuan couldn't find a single reason to refute because Zhuo Lingling was right. Now that he had been targeted by Andre, no matter what choice he made, Andre wouldn't let him off. Since that was the case, there seemed to be no reason for him to shrink back. However, even though he said that, there were some things that Qin Chuan still had to confirm. "Are you sure it's a fake marriage? It won't turn into a real one, right?" Qin Chuan looked at Zhuo Lingling suspiciously. "Although I'm a stowaway, I still have the right to pursue love and happiness." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Zhuo Lingling's hurried steps suddenly stopped. She turned her head and looked at Qin Chuan with a strange gaze, and said to Qin Chuan, "You're definitely the first man in Caesar City to have such thoughts. Do you know that my sister is the #1 beauty of Caesar City? Do you know how many men are lining up to marry her?" Hearing this, Qin Chuan heard her words and whispered, "That's because these guys haven't seen a beautiful woman before." Although Zhuo was the #1 beauty of Caesar City, she was barely on the same level Long Xiao. If Zhuo was the #1 beauty of Caesar cities, the #1 beauty of cities, then the quality of the beauties is the quality of Caesar Cities. As I didn't say anything, let's go." Qin Chuan didn't repeat his words. It was better to keep a low profile in someone else's territory. Inside the meeting room, Andre stood in front of Zhuo, looking at her with a sincere gaze, and said to her, "Cici, my feelings for you are sincere. Marry me, I will definitely treat you well for the rest of my life. Please believe me, okay?" Hearing Andre's words and seeing the sincerity on his handsome face, Zhuo couldn't help but think of the crazily growing granulation on Andre's face yesterday. Her stomach immediately turned, and she almost vomited. "Andre, can you stay away from me a little?" Zhuo took a step back and said to Andre, "Sorry, I haven't thought about it yet. Can you give me some time to think about it? What you're doing is making me nervous." Hearing Zhuo words, Andre's face couldn't help but change slightly. He forced a smile and asked Zhuo, "Did I scare you?" Zhuo looked at Andre with a complicated gaze and said, "Can you please leave first? No." Before Zhuo could finish her words, Andre interrupted her. His gaze became serious as he looked at Zhuo. "Today, you must give me a definite answer. I won't hide it from you. I'll tell you the truth. Now is the critical moment of the selection for the future successor of the Carter family. Although I'm a level 4 talisman formation master and have a noble status, my origin as an inferior human will be a fatal influence to me. I must evolve my bloodline as soon as possible." Hearing Andre's words, Zhuo's gaze sharpened. She said in a deep voice, "So you've set your eyes on me, an intermediate human, and want to use our marriage to evolve your bloodline, right? In your eyes, I'm just a tool." No, you misunderstood me. I definitely didn't mean that. I really like and love you." Andre hurriedly explained, "Please believe in my feelings for you, okay? Sister, don't listen to him. He doesn't have any feelings for you at all. He only cares about his bloodline." At this moment, Zhuo Lingling rushed into the meeting room with Qin Chuan. She quickly walked between Andre and Zhuo, separating them. Andre looked at Zwolingling and Qinchuan, who had suddenly barged in. His expression became extremely gloomy. He said coldly, "What nonsense are you talking about? My feelings for your sister are absolutely sincere." As he spoke, Andre suddenly pointed at Qinchuan and questioned Zwolingling. "Also, why did you bring this outsider to interfere in the matter between me and your sister?" Hearing Andre's words, Zwolingling sneered and said to Andre, "You're wrong. The outsider isn't Qinchuan, it's you." While speaking, Zwolingling had already pushed Qinchuan to Zwasisi's side. She said to Andre, "My sister and Qinchuan fell in love at first sight. Tomorrow, they will go to Caesar City's Civil Affairs Bureau to register their marriage. At that time, Qinchuan will be a permanent resident of Caesar City. He will have the qualifications to represent our Caesar City's Talisman Array Master Association in the upcoming Talisman Array Master Exchange Conference. Don't you dare use this to threaten my sister." Hearing Zwolinghling's words, Andre suddenly turned his head to look at Zwasisi. He stared fixedly at Zwasisi and said in a cold voice, "Is what she said true?" Faced with Andre's cannibalistic look, Zwasisi took a deep breath and suddenly turned to kiss Qinchuan on the cheek. Then she said to Andre in a solemn tone, "Lingling is right. I will soon marry Qinchuan and become husband and wife. So don't disturb me in the future." Chapter 841. This time, Andre didn't leave behind some vicious words like last time. Instead, he chose to turn around and leave without any hesitation. Seeing Andre's behavior, Zwasisi, who knew Andre well, immediately had a bad premonition. "Are you very afraid of him?" Qinchuan looked at Zwasisi. He didn't quite understand why Zwasisi would be afraid of Andre. Although Andre was very strong, compared to the president of Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association, there was still a gap in both status and strength. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Zwasisi turned her head and looked at Qinchuan. She said in a complicated tone, "My relationship with Andre has completely broken down. What I'm worried about is not that he will harm me, but that he will do everything he can to kill you. As long as you die, Heath City's Talisman Array Master Association will definitely fall out of the top 10 or even the top 100. His goal of taking revenge on me will be achieved." Hearing this, Qinchuan's face immediately revealed a trace of embarrassment. So it turned out that she was worried about him. Right now, the only way to protect you is to obtain permanent resident status for you as soon as possible. Then, you have to stay by my side as much as possible. Under my protection, Andre won't have the chance to make a move against you. Zwasisi looked deeply at Qinchuan and said, "Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to register our marriage." "So hasty?" Qinchuan was somewhat astonished. Even if this was a fake marriage, wasn't this a bit too hasty? "You don't understand, Andre. You don't know how strong his desire for revenge is." Zwasisi said to Qinchuan in an extremely serious tone, "If you want to die, we could delay it a bit. Then let's go now." This time, Qinchuan didn't have any objections. Compared to his little life, everything else was secondary. Under Zwasisi's lead, the group immediately arrived at the Talisman Array Master Association's teleportation hall. There are teleportation portals here, and they could go to any place in Heath City. When he saw the teleportation portals, Qinchuan was slightly shocked. There was actually such a thing in this world. It was simply too miraculous. To a country bumpkin like Qinchuan, any teleportation gate was an extremely magical existence. However, to the two sisters, Zwasisi and Zwolingling, it was just a very ordinary tool that they had been using since they were young. They didn't find it amazing at all. "It seems like you don't know enough about this world. I will slowly explain it to you later." Qinchuan. The teleportation portal. Teleport. Q. It's really very cool. Qinchuan didn't know how to describe his experience today. If this teleportation portal was placed in the Star Dragon Federation, even if they studied it for 8 to 10 years, they still wouldn't be able to understand the principles behind it. This was a technological product that was beyond his knowledge. Just as Qin Chuan was thinking about this, Zhuo suddenly appeared in front of him and asked, I forgot to ask you. You're a humanoid, right? You didn't take a morphing potion, did you? Qin Chuan nodded and said to Zhuo, I've been like this since I was young. I should be a humanoid. Zhuo frowned slightly and said to Qin Chuan, Let's go. I'll take you for a blood test first. There's no need for a blood test, right? Qin Chuan glanced at the signboard of the Civil Affairs Bureau not far away and said to Zhuo, The Civil Affairs Bureau is right here. Let's hurry up and register. It'll be troublesome if we have to line up. I'm the president of Caesar City's Symbol Array Master Guild. Naturally, I have a special passage. There's no need to line up. Zhuo gave Qin Chuan a deep look. You're refusing a blood test? Why? Seeing that Zhuo was about to continue asking, Qin Chuan suddenly let out a low roar and released his complete form, erupting all of his strength. After doing this, he said to Zhuo, You saw it. I'm in a state of full eruption. There's no abnormal reaction from my body. This means that I'm not an inferior humanoid. Zhuo looked at Qin Chuan in astonishment and said in disbelief, Why don't you have any abnormalities? Hearing this, Qin Chuan was somewhat puzzled. Should I have some abnormalities? Zhuo stared at Qin Chuan with a burning gaze and took a deep breath. I'm an intermediate humanoid. When I erupt, my body will also have some special abnormalities. Even if I'm a superior humanoid, it's impossible for there to be no abnormalities when I erupt. Hearing Zhuo words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but be stunned. There was actually such a thing? He was careless. Withdraw your power. Let's go register first. Zhuo gave Qin Chuan a subtle look. We'll talk about the rest when we get back. Seeing the change of expression on Zhuo's face, Qin Chuan knew that his identity should have been exposed. This made him have a bad feeling in his heart. He took a deep look at Zhuo's back. Now he could only pray that Zhuo didn't have any evil intentions towards him. The process of registering a marriage was very simple and very fast. The only thing that made Qin Chuan feel a little uncomfortable was that the staff of the Civil Affairs Bureau looked at him strangely, as if they couldn't understand why Zhuo would fall in love with such a person. Looking at the red booklet in his hand, Qin Chuan couldn't help but sigh. The next time I get married, it'll be my second marriage. Zhuo glanced at Qin Chuan and said, We're only here to help you get permanent residence. Besides, we're all cultivators. We don't care about second and third marriages. Without waiting for Qin Chuan to speak, Zhuo pulled Qin Chuan out of the Civil Affairs Bureau. As they walked, she said, The news of us registering our marriage will definitely spread throughout Heath City in a short period of time. At that time, Andre will definitely get the news. In a fit of rage, he might do something daring. So stay with me tonight. Hearing this, Qin Chuan raised his eyebrows slightly. He raised the red booklet in his hand and said to Zhuo, We're now legal husband and wife. If we stay in the same room, aren't you afraid that I'll do something inappropriate to you? Zhuo gave Qin Chuan a deep look and replied, First of all, the difference in strength between us is too great. If you want to do something to me, unless I'm willing, the chances of you succeeding are almost zero. Secondly, if something really happens between the two of us, I might not be the one at a disadvantage. You know this in your heart, don't you? Chapter 842. I'm going to kill that brat. I'm going to take revenge on that *TCH. Andre roared angrily in the room. Because of his anger, his face was covered with soybean-sized granules. Countless granules were also growing out of the places covered by his clothes. He looked extremely ferocious and ugly. Dong, dong, dong. There was a series of knocks on the door, followed by an old voice. Andre, are you in there? Andre took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. After the granules on his face disappeared, he said to the door, Come in. Buzz. The door slowly opened, and a white-haired old man in a tuxedo walked in. He looked at Andre and whispered, Andre, are you in a better mood? Andre gritted his teeth and said, Teacher, you know me. I can't be in a good mood, but I have a piece of bad news for you. The old man said calmly. Zwisisi has already registered her marriage with that young man called Chinchuan. Now, Chinchuan is a permanent resident of Caesar City. He can represent Caesar City's Talisman Array Master Guild to participate in the Talisman Array Master Exchange Conference. Andre was furious when he heard the old man's words. He roared, "That be *TCH. How dare she?" The old man frowned when he saw that Andre was about to lose control of his anger. He raised his hand and tapped lightly. The granules on Andre's face disappeared. "Andre, I've told you many times that losing your temper is an instinct. Controlling your temper is a skill. Why do you still like to lose your temper so much?" The old man looked at Andre with disappointment. "How are you going to compete with Senna like this?" Andre looked guilty when he heard the old man's words. He whispered, "I'm sorry, teacher. I've disappointed you. Andre, as your teacher, I've been teaching you for 80 years. I've watched you walk step by step over the past 80 years. I'm very pleased with your talent in rune arrays, but I can't do anything about your bloodline and personality. If you can change your personality and evolve your bloodline, you will definitely be the heir of the Carter family." The old man looked at Andre. "Tonight, I will meet that young man and tell him that there are some people he can't afford to offend." Andre was a little surprised when he heard this. "Teacher, are you going to make a move?" The old man looked deeply at Andre and said, "This might be the last time I'll help you. I'm already old. You should learn to walk your own path." "Teacher," Andre looked at the old man and was so excited that he couldn't say a word. His teacher, Jet, was already 1,400 years old and was approaching the lifespan limit of a soul formation stage cultivator. Every time he attacked, Jet's lifespan would decrease. Over time, Jet didn't have many years left to live. If he attacked again this time, Jet might really die. "Andre, you're a good kid." Jet took one last look at Andre before he turned around and walked out. After returning to the Rune Array Master Guild, Zwisisi took Chinchuan directly to her room. "This is where I usually rest. There's only one bedroom. I'll rest in the bedroom at night, and you can rest in the living room." Zwisisi took Chinchuan to the living room and pointed to an extremely spacious area in front of them. She said to Chinchuan, "I'll provide you with everything you want. If you have any needs, you can ask me. You can even try that kind of thing. Maybe I'll agree to it for the sake of evolving my bloodline." Hearing Zwisisi's words, Chinchuan pretended to be confused. "I don't understand what you're talking about." "You understand." Zwisisi looked at Chinchuan with a subtle expression. "Actually, you should be a direct descendant of the ancient humans." Chinchuan was still confused. "What ancient humans? I really don't know." When she saw that Chinchuan refused to admit it, Zwisisi pursed her lips slightly and said to Chinchuan, "I know what you're worried about. Since you're unwilling to admit it, then I'll naturally not force you to admit it. All right, I'm a little tired today, so I'll go back and rest first." As she spoke, Zwisisi walked toward her bedroom. After taking 2 steps, she turned back to look at Chinchuan and said to Chinchuan, "Right, if you want to cultivate, you can use my cultivation room as well." Chinchuan nodded when he heard this and said to Zwisisi, "Thank you." After seeing Zwisisi enter her bedroom and close the door, Chinchuan immediately walked towards the cultivation room at the side. If it weren't for the fact that he had too many things to do in the past 2 days, he wouldn't have been able to resist the urge to cultivate. After entering the cultivation room, Chinchuan sat down cross-legged on the floor and whispered to himself, "Ever since I came to this world, I felt a strange feeling growing in my body. It's as if I'm about to evolve, and it's getting stronger and stronger. It shouldn't be a bad thing." As he whispered to himself, Chinchuan had already begun to circulate the thunder-devouring art. After circulating the cultivation technique for 1 cycle, an astonishing change suddenly occurred in his body. His body suddenly grew, and his height increased from 175 centimeters to 185 centimeters. His thin physique also became more muscular, and his face also became more handsome than before. Furthermore, the changes in Chinchuan's body didn't only occur in his appearance, but also in his dantian, brain region, and nascent soul. Rumble. The majestic spiritual power tumbled in Qinchuan's dantian, like the stormy waves in the vast ocean, making an extremely heavy roar. If Qinchuan's original spiritual power was like ordinary water, then his current spiritual power was like pure water. It had undergone a complete evolution and became even purer. The evolution of the spiritual power brought about a qualitative improvement in Qinchuan's strength. Following that was an increase in the realm. Qinchuan's realm, which was originally at the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, suddenly rose to the perfect stage of the nascent soul realm. Everything happened naturally, and there were no worries. This feeling, Qinchuan stopped his cultivation in horror. He felt the changes in his body, and his face was full of shock. He expected some changes to his body when he cultivated, but he didn't expect the changes to be so exaggerated. Involuntarily, Qinchuan thought of the banished land. The banished land was a world where the laws of heaven and earth were not perfect. In that world, everyone's cultivation was restricted by the imperfect laws of heaven and earth. Therefore, they would leave all kinds of flaws in their bodies during the cultivation process. When he came to the outside world and came into contact with the complete laws of heaven and earth, he would naturally repair the flaws left behind when he cultivated and perfected himself, which led to these changes in his body. Chapter 843. My realm has been promoted to the Yuanying realm. My brain is wider than before. My dantian has also expanded. My spiritual power has become purer, and my meridians have been expanded. Qinchuan counted the various changes that had taken place in his body, and the smile on his face became more and more brilliant. If he had known that cultivation would bring him so many benefits, he would have done it long ago. Why would he wait until now? Buzz. At this moment, the door of the cultivation room suddenly opened, and Zwisisi, dressed in light pajamas, came in. Qinchuan saw Zwisisi suddenly appear and asked with some doubts, "What can I do for you?" Zwisisi looked at Qinchuan, who had undergone earth-shaking changes and was slightly stunned. After a while, she said to Qinchuan, "Don't you know how much noise you made when you were cultivating before?" Qinchuan looked at Zwisisi apologetically and said, "Sorry, I didn't expect to disturb your rest." Zwisisi walked to Qinchuan's side and squatted down. She looked at Qinchuan curiously and asked, "How did you suddenly improve your realm by 2 small stages in such a short time? And your body has changed a lot." Qinchuan looked at Zwisisi, who was squatting in front of him. He was about to speak, but from the corner of his eye, he noticed the beautiful scenery under the open collar of Zwisisi's pajamas. An unnatural expression flashed across his face, and he subconsciously turned his head to Zwisisi and said, "I suddenly had some enlightenment when I was cultivating, and then I became like this." Hearing Qinchuan's explanation, Zwisisi looked at Qinchuan playfully and asked, "Are you usually so interesting? Have you not tasted a woman yet?" In the face of Zwisisi's almost naked temptation, Qinchuan coughed softly and said to Zwisisi, "Sorry, I'm focused on cultivation, and I have no idea about these things. And can you stay away from me? I'm not used to it." Zwisisi chuckled and said to Qinchuan, "What do you mean? Do you think that a 130-year-old woman like me isn't good enough for you?" "I didn't say that." Qinchuan hurriedly shook his head. Now that he was living under someone else's roof, it was better not to speak too arrogantly. "All right, I'll stop teasing you. I have something serious to ask you." Zwisisi looked at Qinchuan and asked, "Are you confident that you can reach the soul formation stage in 3 months?" Qinchuan was stunned for a moment and asked with some doubt, "Why are you asking this?" "Originally, I only hoped that you would be able to help our Heath City's Talisman Array Master Guild maintain a spot in the top 100. But if you can reach the soul formation stage, then perhaps our Heath City's Talisman Array Master Guild will be able to maintain its position in the top 10. Zwisisi looked at Qinchuan seriously. "Therefore, your cultivation level is very important to me." Qinchuan shook his head and said, "I can only say that everything depends on the will of the heavens. Let nature take its course. Zhuo stared at Qin Chuan. After a while, she asked Qin Chuan, "Do you feel like you've lost out?" Qin Chuan smiled and shook his head. "If it weren't for your help, perhaps I would be sweeping the streets in the bottom layer right now. I should thank you and repay you." Qin Chuan didn't feel like he had lost out or gained from cooperating with Zhuo because he had obtained what he wanted from her. It was only right for him to contribute something. However, there was a limit to this contribution. He couldn't give unconditionally like he did with Lu Zi or Ningya. "You're a very interesting young man," Zhuo sighed, "but you should still cultivate as much as possible. If you reach the soul formation stage and participate in the Talisman Array Master Exchange Conference, you will gain extra benefits." When Qin Chuan heard this, he asked curiously, "What do you mean by additional gains?" "If you can reach the soul formation stage before the age of 30, you will become the star of the entire sane state with your status as a level 4 Advanced Talisman Array Master. Even the Imperial family may look at you in a new light. When the time comes, the Imperial family will definitely try to recruit you. You may even become the Imperial Talisman Array Master of the Imperial family. This is definitely a great thing for you." After hearing Zhuo words, Qin Chuan immediately lost interest in the extra benefits. He looked at Zhuo and asked, "Is there anything else?" Seeing Qin Chuan's reaction, Zhuo asked doubtfully, "Don't you want to work for the Imperial family?" Qin Chuan chuckled when he heard this, and then he said to Zhuo, "Perhaps to all of you, entering the Imperial family and becoming a Talisman Formation Master of the Imperial family is something worthy of being proud of, but to me, it doesn't possess any attraction." After hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Zhuo looked at Qin Chuan with a complicated expression. She looked at Qin Chuan meaningfully and said to Qin Chuan, "Did you know? My father once told me that true geniuses are absolutely unwilling to become the vassal of others." Qin Chuan slightly raised his eyebrows and asked, "So you were testing me just now?" Zhuo smiled slightly. "Just now I was indeed testing you. Because you truly are too outstanding, I wanted to keep you here in Heath City. But from your performance, I can tell that perhaps our cooperation is only a short-term one." "Not necessarily." Qin Chuan looked at Zhuo. "No matter what, you two sisters are the ones who have helped me the most since I came to this world." Perhaps, before Qin Chuan could finish his words, Zhuo suddenly reached out and covered Qin Chuan's mouth. At the same time, her expression became serious, and she said in a low voice, "Someone has sneaked in." Hearing Zhuo words, Qin Chuan subconsciously thought of Andre. At the same time, he suddenly felt the scene in front of him change. The training room turned into a wasteland, and Zhuo disappeared. "Hello, young man." An old figure suddenly appeared in front of Qin Chuan and looked at Qin Chuan from head to toe. Qin Chuan looked at the old man who suddenly appeared with a vigilant expression and asked, "Who are you?" "Who I am isn't important. What's important is that you are indeed a young man worthy of my attention." The old man's gaze gradually sharpened as he looked at Qin Chuan. "Don't worry, I'm very fast. You won't feel any pain." As soon as the old man finished speaking, Qin Chuan felt his body suddenly stiffen. He was completely unable to move, his thoughts were also frozen, and even his breathing stopped. The power of law. Involuntarily, this thought popped into Qin Chuan's mind. The old man standing in front of him was a deity transformation expert who had grasped the power of law. Chapter 844. Qin Chuan could be said to be dead for sure in the face of the death trap set up by the old man with the power of law. Even though his strength had skyrocketed not long ago, he was still no match for the old man. Just when Qin Chuan thought he was really going to die, the space around him suddenly shattered inch by inch like a mirror, and the power of law that was controlling him also disappeared. "Jet, you're too bold. You've gone too far." Zhuo stood beside Qin Chuan and gloomily looked at the old man, standing not far away. The killing intent on her face was undisguised. "President Zhuo, you've made the wrong choice." Jet calmly looked at Zhuo. "You'll regret it. Before, I was still conflicted about whether what I did was right or wrong. But now I'm not conflicted, because aside from marrying Andre, everything I do is absolutely right. Zwisisi took a deep look at Jet. If you don't want to have a taste of the meteorological array, then you'd better leave this place immediately. Hearing Zwisisi mention the meteorological array, Jet's face couldn't help but reveal a deep sense of fear. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the reasons Zwisisi could sit firmly in the position of president of Caesar City's Talisman Array Master Guild was because she had the method to activate the meteorological array in her hands. If not for this, Zwisisi would have been overthrown long ago. The meteorological array can only protect him for a while. He'll walk out of here sooner or later. Jet took a deep look at Qin Xuan one last time, and then his figure suddenly disappeared. After confirming that Jet had left, Zwisisi immediately looked at Qin Xuan and asked with some concern, "How are you?" Qin Xuan gently shook his head and said in a somewhat low voice, "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine. Fortunately, you appeared in time. Otherwise, I might have been dead." Before truly fighting with a divine transformation expert, Qin Xuan would never know how huge the gap between him and a divine transformation expert was. This experience made Qin Xuan realize that he was still too weak. If he wanted to protect himself, he had to become stronger. The person who wants to kill you is Jet. He's Andre's teacher and a veteran mid-divine transformation stage expert. Zwisisi said to Qin Xuan, his greatest strength lies in the fact that he has mastered a kind of law, and it is the most powerful law of space. Although he has only scratched the surface, it is enough for him to laugh proudly in Caesar City. Hearing Zwisisi's words, Qin Xuan pursed his lips and asked, "Do you have any way to increase my cultivation as soon as possible? I want to step into the spirit's severing stage as soon as possible." Zwisisi frowned and said to Qin Xuan, "Although I was looking forward to you reaching the soul formation stage, this is not something that can be done overnight." Qin Xuan turned to look at Zwisisi with cold eyes and said in a deep voice, "I almost died just now." Since stepping into the cultivation world, this was the first time Qin Xuan had faced the threat of death so closely. He hated the feeling of not being able to control his own fate. Facing Qin Xuan's sharp eyes, Zwisisi sighed and said to Qin Xuan, "This time it was my fault. It was too late when I found out about Jet, but I promise you that this kind of thing will never happen again." "You still don't understand what I mean." Qin Xuan took a deep breath and said to Zwisisi, "I just want to control my own fate. I don't want to rely on anyone." In the face of Qin Xuan's insistence, Zwisisi could only helplessly reply, "If you want to reach the spirit-severing stage from the peak Yuanying stage, the first thing you have to do is to understand the law of space and then master it." "The law of space?" Qin Xuan frowned. "As long as I master the law of space, I can reach the spirit-severing stage." Zwisisi nodded and said to Qin Xuan, "The difference between the spirit-severing stage and the Yuanying stage is the use and control of the law of space. When you master the law of space, you can naturally reach the spirit-severing stage." After hearing this, Qin Xuan thought for a moment and asked Zwisisi, "How do I master the law of space?" "You can understand and comprehend it from your own innate attribute," Zwisisi said to Qin Xuan. "For example, my innate attribute is water, and the law of space I understand and comprehend is water." While speaking, Zwisisi raised her hand to Qin Xuan, and a drop of water slowly appeared in her palm. It looked ordinary, but Qin Xuan felt that the power contained in this drop of water was extremely powerful, enough to easily penetrate his body. "This is the law of space," Zwisisi said to Qin Xuan. "Most people start to touch the law of space from their own innate attribute. When their understanding of the law of space becomes deeper and deeper, they try to master other law of space." When Qin Xuan heard this, he lowered his head and looked at his palm. He tried to condense a ball of lightning energy in his palm. He looked at the ball of lightning energy in his hand that was emitting an extremely violent aura and said in a low voice, "This is just pure lightning energy. It's not the power of laws." Zwisisi chuckled and said to Qin Xuan, "Of course this is not the law of space. If you can master the law of space so easily, then wouldn't we, the spirit-severing stage, be a joke? Qin asked Zhuo with some doubts. What's the difference between the law of space and ordinary power? In response to Qin question, Zhuo thought for a moment and replied, the law of space is actually the evolution of ordinary power. It's the origin of everything. To put it simply, water, whether it's the sea, the river, or the rain, they're all made of water. The water that makes them up is the law of space. In the past, we used the law of space to exert these powers. After reaching the spirit-severing stage, we use the law of space to exert these powers. The former is using the law of space, which means that the law of space doesn't belong to you. The latter is using the law of space, which means that the law of space you use belongs to you. And the power that belongs to you will naturally be stronger and more stable. After hearings with Cece's explanation, Qin still felt a little confused. He frowned and pondered. After a long time, he opened his eyes and said to Zhuo, thank you. Hearing this, Zhuo smiled and said to Qin, no need to thank me. Also, I'm very curious to see how far you can go. If you can really master the law of space and reach the spirit-severing stage in 3 months, then you will be the youngest spirit-severing stage cultivator in the sane state. I will. Qin clenched his fists. Whether it was for the sake of participating in the Talisman Formation Master Exchange or for self-preservation, he would do his best to master the law of space as soon as possible and reach the spirit-severing stage. Chapter 845. Late at night, Qin sat cross-legged in the cultivation room. He looked at the small ball of thunder power in his hand and couldn't help but fall into deep thought. What is the power of law? What kind of power of law is the law of thunder? Qin was very curious about what the law of thunder looked like. He tried to release the power of thunder in countless ways today. From the feeling, there was no change except for the different shape. In other words, the power he released was simply the power of thunder, not the power of the law of thunder. Just as Qin was puzzled, the scene of his tribulation in the sword god's ruins suddenly popped up in his mind. At that time, the power of thunder tribulation fell from the tribulation clouds. The majestic and powerful feeling seemed to have some meaning of the power of law. If the power of law is the power of thunder tribulation, Qin suddenly thought of the time when Ningya and Zhongqiu were going through the tribulation outside the mountain city. He had absorbed some of the power of the thunder tribulation. Even now, the power of the thunder tribulation was still stored in his body. With a thought, a hair-like power of the thunder tribulation appeared in his hand. It felt completely different from the power of the thunder tribulation he released before. However, after carefully sensing it, Qin frowned again and whispered, "That's not right. Although the power of thunder tribulation is different from the power of thunder, it is still not a law." Thinking of this, Qin released all the power of thunder tribulation and gathered it in his right hand. He condensed a ball of thunder power in his left hand. He carefully sensed the difference between the power of thunder tribulation and the power of thunder, trying to find traces of the law of thunder. However, after a whole night, he found nothing. Phew! Qin dispersed the two powers in his hands and let out a long sigh of relief. He said in a low voice, "The power of laws is indeed profound. It's definitely not something that I can understand and grasp so easily." While speaking, Qin had already stood up. Today, he planned to continue reading in the library to understand more about this world. When Qin walked out of the cultivation room, Zhuo happened to walk out of the bedroom. She looked at Qin with some surprise and asked, "Did you cultivate in the cultivation room all night?" Qin nodded and asked Zhuo, "Is there any record of the law of thunder in the library?" Zhuo shook her head and said to Qin, "The power of law is a mysterious feeling. It can't be recorded or described in words. You have to experience it yourself to truly grasp the power of law." Hearing Zhuo words, Qin nodded again and said, "Thank you. Wait, are you going to the library?" Zhuo said to Qin Chuan. My study is connected to the library. You can read in my study. It will be safer that way. If he hadn't experienced what happened last night, Qin Chuan might have rejected Zhuo good intentions. But now that he didn't have the ability to protect himself, he still hoped to stay in a safe environment. Thus, he said to Zhuo, thank you. Then I will go to your study. Zhuo led Qin Chuan into the study and said to Qin Chuan, you stay here. I will activate the astronomical formation to protect the study. Apart from me, no one can enter or leave. If you want to go out, contact me. This is for you. Zhuo handed a golden bell to Qin Chuan and said to Qin Chuan, if you want to find me, ring the bell. I will hear you. Qin Chuan took the bell and said to Zhuo, I will definitely enter the top 10 of the Talisman Array Master Exchange Conference. I will protect your Caesar City's Talisman Array Master Association's position in the top 10. I am looking forward to it. Zhuo smiled faintly and turned to leave. After Zhuo left, a resplendent golden talisman array slowly appeared around the study. This was the astronomical formation, a powerful talisman array that even deity transformation experts who had grasped the power of law would be wary of. After reading many books, Qin Chuan understood one thing. The same galaxy he was currently in was only a small galaxy in the corner of the universe. Above the same galaxy, there was an even larger galaxy called Tron Nebula, and above Tron Nebula, there was an even vaster celestial cluster. And the rulers of the celestial cluster were one of the top 10 ancient races, the Tian people. In Tron Nebula, there are dozens of galaxies as large as the same galaxy. Qin Chuan frowned as he read through the records in the book. So the world I have come into contact with is only the tip of the iceberg. It seems that my understanding of this world is still too little. Qin Chuan closed the book in his hand and couldn't help but look at the astronomical formation. From Qin Chuan's perspective, the astronomical formation was undoubtedly extremely complex and profound. But it wasn't to the extent that he couldn't understand it at all. Compared to studying the power of law, Qin Chuan was more interested in the astronomical formation. If he could become a 5th-rank talisman array master, he would be able to control his own destiny and no longer need to fear deity transformation experts. After a day of work, Zhuo only rested in the office for a short while before returning to her room. She didn't immediately return to her bedroom to rest. Instead, she first went to the study to check on Qin Chuan's situation. Zhuo stood at the door and looked at Qin Chuan, who was lost in thought as he stared at the astronomical formation. Just as she was about to speak to Qin Chuan, she suddenly saw from the corner of her eye that Qin Chuan's hand was unconsciously writing and drawing on a piece of paper. She took a closer look and saw that it was actually an analysis diagram of the astronomical formation. Zhuo was stunned when she saw this. Qin Chuan was actually analyzing the astronomical formation. Buzz. At this moment, the astronomical formation suddenly buzzed, as if it had sensed something. Zhuo immediately stopped the astronomical formation when she saw this. At the same time, Qin Chuan also woke up. Just now, Qin Chuan looked at Zhuo in confusion and asked, "When did you come over?" Zhuo took a deep look at Qin Chuan. Suddenly, she walked up to Qin Chuan and stood face to face with Qin Chuan. The expression on her face was exceptionally frightening. "Do you know that you almost died just now?" Qin Chuan was taken aback when he heard this. He asked, "Did that guy come again?" "No, not that guy. It's the astronomical formation," Zhuo said to Qin Chuan in an extremely solemn tone. "You were studying the astronomical formation just now and almost triggered the attack condition of the astronomical formation. If I wasn't there at that time, maybe you would have been killed by the astronomical formation in seconds." Hearing Zhuo explanation, Qin Chuan's face couldn't help but reveal a touch of shock. He actually almost triggered the attack condition of the astronomical formation just now. Chapter 846. What's going on? Qin Chuan looked at Zhuo with a puzzled gaze. He had only stared at the astronomical formation for a while. How could he have almost triggered the astronomical formations attack condition? Hearing Qinchuan's words, Zhuosisi reached out her hand and lightly knocked on the table in front of Qinchuan. She said to Qinchuan, "Don't tell me you don't know what you just did. Look down at the paper on the table. Look at the things you wrote." Hearing this, Qinchuan subconsciously looked down at the paper on the table. When he saw the structural analysis of the astronomical formation written on the paper, Qinchuan couldn't help but be stunned. He turned his head and looked at the pen in his hand. Extremely shocked, he said, "Could it be that I wrote this? But why don't I have any consciousness at all? You'll have to ask yourself this. When I came in, I saw you writing these things." Moreover, Zhuosisi reached out her hand and took a look at the paper in front of Qinchuan. A subtle look appeared in the depths of her eyes. "The things you wrote are very interesting." Qinchuan looked at Zhuosisi curiously and asked, "What do you mean?" "Since you can trigger the astronomical formations attack condition, this means that your research is correct." Zhuosisi looked deeply at Qinchuan and said, "You should be the first advanced 4th-tier talisman formation master to make the astronomical formation feel threatened." Hearing this, Qinchuan looked at Zhuosisi in shock and asked, "Could it be that the astronomical formation has its own consciousness?" The astronomical formation doesn't have its own consciousness. However, this doesn't mean that the astronomical formation is an inanimate object. Zhuosisi sat down beside Qinchuan. She looked at Qinchuan with an extremely serious gaze and said, "According to common sense, it's impossible for someone who hasn't reached the deity transformation stage to become a 5th-tier talisman formation master. However, your performance has made me feel as if my view of the world has been turned upside down. Perhaps you really can become the first nascent soul stage genius to become a 5th-tier talisman formation master." After she finished speaking, even Zhuosisi felt it was slightly inconceivable. A nascent soul realm cultivator below the age of 30 had become a grade 5 talisman formation master. How terrifying was this? "You think too much. You think too highly of me." Qinchuan forced a smile. "To be honest, I'm really confused about the celestial phenomenon array. I don't know anything about it. I don't understand what's written on the paper either." Hearing Qinchuan's explanation, Zhuosisi couldn't help but frown slightly and ask, "Don't you have any impression of it?" "No." Qinchuan shook his head. "I really don't have any recollection of it." While speaking, Qinchuan stood up and stretched his body. Then he asked Zhuosisi, "Did anything special happen today?" Zhuosisi shook her head and said to Qinchuan, "Everything is normal today, but only during the day. I can't be sure if someone will attack you at night." "Well, it's really frustrating." Qinchuan sighed. "I'm going to the cultivation room to continue studying the law of thunder. Goodbye." Looking at Qinchuan's figure walking out of the library, Zhuosisi hesitated for a moment. In the end, she called out to Qinchuan and asked Qinchuan, "Do you regret meddling in our affairs? After all, it has caused you a lot of trouble." Hearing this, Qinchuan looked back at Zhuosisi and said with a chuckle, "If you want to gain something, you have to pay a price. I have obtained knowledge that is extremely important to me here. Naturally, I have to pay something, such as a stable life or freedom. I don't have any special feelings about these, and I won't regret it because I know that regret is a useless emotion." After saying this, Qinchuan turned and walked towards the cultivation room. Zhuosisi looked at Qinchuan's back with a complicated expression. Suddenly, she got up and quickly caught up with Qinchuan. "I'll go with you. If I'm not by your side, I'll feel very uneasy." In the cultivation room, Qinchuan once again condensed the power of thunder tribulation with his left hand and the power of thunder with his right hand. He carefully perceived the similarities between these two similar yet somewhat different powers. He wanted to find traces of the law of thunder. Zhuosisi sat cross-legged and quietly watched Qinchuan comprehend and cultivate. "He's really a hard-working person." Zhuosisi looked at Qinchuan, and this thought involuntarily appeared in her mind. It had been 4 hours since they entered the cultivation room. During these 4 hours, Qinchuan didn't have any intention to rest. He had been diligently comprehending and cultivating. Even after several failed attempts, She didn't see any disappointment on Qinchuan's face, let alone any impatience. If it were her, she wouldn't be able to be as calm as Qinchuan. But perhaps it was because the time was too short. After all, only 4 hours had passed. After staring at Qinchuan for a while, Zhuosisi also decided to start cultivating. When she began to comprehend the law of water, an extremely mysterious charm suddenly appeared in the cultivation room, attracting Qinchuan's attention. Qinchuan slowly turned his head and looked at Zhuosisi. When he saw the hazy mist surrounding Zhuosisi, his eyes couldn't help but reveal a subtle look. He murmured in a low voice, "Is this the feeling of the law of water? What are you talking about?" Zhuosisi opened her eyes and looked at Qinchuan. Qinchuan looked at Zhuosisi and pursed his lips. "I'm wondering if I've taken the wrong path." "Taken the wrong path?" Zhuosisi looked at Qinchuan in confusion and asked, "Can you be more specific?" Qinchuan thought about it seriously and said to Zhuosisi, "If the law of water is a sword, what I should be doing now is practicing swordsmanship to use it, not learning to make a sword by myself. The first thing a peak Yuaniing stage cultivator must do to understand and master the law of water if they want to advance to the apotheosis stage." What Qinchuan was doing now was analyzing the structure of the law of water, which was completely opposite. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Zhuosisi was slightly stunned. Then she said to Qinchuan, "I understand what you mean. You've been trying to analyze what kind of existence the law of water is, right?" "Yes." Qinchuan nodded and said in confusion, "Did I do something wrong?" "Of course you did something wrong." Zhuosisi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You want to run when you haven't learned how to walk? Analyzing the law of water is something a Dongshu stage cultivator can do. We're not qualified yet. Hearing Zhuosisi's words, Qinchuan took a deep breath and said to Zhuosisi, "In that case, I think I know how to master the law of thunder." Hearing Qinchuan's words, the smile on Zhuosisi's face suddenly froze. She looked at Qinchuan in astonishment and asked, "You found a clue?" Qinchuan nodded and said to Zhuosisi, "Give me another half a month, and I'll definitely be able to master the law of water." Chapter 847. The Carter Family. In the family council hall, Andre was sitting in his seat, glaring at his younger brother, Seno, who was sitting opposite him. His eyes were full of anger. "My dear brother, is this how you treat your elder brother?" Andre said to Seno in a cold tone. "I've already given you 2 properties under my name, and you still want a yard after taking an inch. Aren't you going too far?" Hearing Andre's words, Seno smiled faintly and calmly said, "Dear elder brother, I've never been disrespectful to you. I just feel that the people under you are too useless. With their abilities, they aren't qualified to manage such an important family business. I just want my people to help elder brother. After all, we are all working for the family, aren't we?" "You." Andre was furious. What he hated most was Seno using the family's righteousness to suppress him. "The two of you, have you had enough?" The current patriarch of the Carter family, Churchill, who was sitting at the head of the table, looked indifferently at the 2 brothers who were quarreling with a hint of impatience in his eyes. Upon hearing Churchill's words, Andre and Seno immediately shut their mouths and turned to look at Churchill. Their expressions became respectful, and there wasn't the slightest trace of anger or carelessness on their faces. Seeing the 2 brothers' performance, Churchill sighed and said to Seno, "Seno, you are too reckless. You shouldn't have casually sent people to interfere with the properties I gave your brother." Hearing Churchill's words, Andre's face suddenly showed a touch of joy, while Seno's expression changed slightly. He seemed to be a little frightened. But before Andre could be happy for long, Churchill suddenly changed the topic and said to Andre, "But Andre, the management skills of your people are indeed not outstanding, and they are even a little mediocre. If you can't find a suitable person to manage those properties, as your father, I can only let Seno take over the properties in your hands for the sake of the overall situation." Andre's expression changed drastically when he heard this, while Seno's face was filled with ecstasy. The mood of the 2 men changed drastically almost in an instant. "Father, I will fire all those useless things and find the most suitable person to manage those properties in the shortest time possible. Andre swore to Churchill, I will not let you down. For Andre, who was competing with Seno for the position of successor and was at a disadvantage, those properties could be said to be extremely important chips. Once he lost those properties, his authority in the family would plummet to its lowest point in history. Those who had been optimistic about him and were willing to serve him would definitely leave him without hesitation and join Seno's subordinates. As a result, he would completely lose the competition for the position of successor. No matter what, he would not allow such a thing to happen. I'm very pleased with your attitude. Churchill smiled and said to Andre, go ahead and do it. I'll support you. Bang! Andre threw a precious porcelain viciously onto the ground, his expression extremely ferocious. Damn it, even an old thing like you is siding with Seno. Why? Is it just because his bloodline is purer than mine? Andre was furious. His chest was burning with rage, and his face had begun to grow granules uncontrollably. He felt that he had to vent the anger in his heart. Otherwise, he would definitely go crazy. At this moment, Jet's figure suddenly appeared in front of Andre. He raised his hand and gently pressed his palm on Andre's head. With a gentle force pouring into Andre's body, Andre gradually calmed down, and the granules on his face disappeared. Teacher, Andre looked at Jet, who was standing in front of him. His eyes were filled with guilt. In this family, only Jet truly cared about him. However, he had disappointed Jet time and time again. He really shouldn't have done that. I already know about it. The patriarch is indeed siding with Seno and has wronged you. Hearing Jet's words, Andre's face couldn't help but reveal a pained expression. He whispered, Teacher, what should I do? Andre, don't bother with those family properties anymore. With Seno's character, he will definitely obstruct your reform and make you swallow the fruit of defeat once again. If you want to turn defeat into victory, the only way is to fight to the death. Teacher, how can I fight to the death? Give up everything you have in Heath City, leave this place, and find a new way out. Hearing Jet's suggestion, Andre couldn't help but be shocked. He had operated in Heath City for decades to reach his current position. Jet actually wanted him to give up everything? Wasn't this the same as handing over the position of successor to Seno? Seeing the expression on Andre's face, Jet sighed and asked, If you stay in Heath City, how confident are you in defeating Seno? Facing Jet's question, Andre opened his mouth but couldn't give a clear answer. Because he knew very well that in his current situation, he definitely wasn't a match for Seno. Seeing Andre's silence, Jet knew that Andre wasn't stupid and could still be saved. He looked at Andre seriously and said, Leave Heath City and start over. Then, in 3 months, amaze the world with a single brilliant feat at the Talisman Array Master Exchange Conference and return to Heath City. At that time, everything you've lost today will be returned with interest. Hearing this, Andre asked somewhat doubtfully, Teacher, where do you want me to go? Why do I feel like you've already arranged everything for me? Jet took a deep look at Andre and said, Not long ago, I received an invitation, an opportunity to join the holy race, the sacred clan. Andre was shocked. Teacher, are you talking about the sacred clan, one of the top 10 ancient clans? That's right, the sacred clan, Jet said to Andre in a serious tone. In the celestial cluster, joining the sacred clan is a taboo matter. Remember, you must keep this matter a secret. Teacher, I will definitely keep it a secret. Andre nodded heavily and asked, Teacher, are we going to borrow the power of the sacred clan to take control of the family? Jet nodded and said to Andre, The sacred clan will arrange a new identity for you to participate in the Talisman Array Master Exchange Conference. At that time, you will become the most dazzling star of the Talisman Array Master Exchange Conference and receive the favor of the royal family. At that time, do you think a mere successor of the Carter family is still important to you? Hearing Jet's words, Andre felt as though he could already see a whole new world unfolding before him. He couldn't help but reveal a look of anticipation and yearning. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.